Jay-Z and Tommy, some friends of mine, and we're talking about various things. Tommy was just now talking about abiogenesis and the failure of it as a scientific idea. Well, go ahead, continue, Tommy.
Oh, I was just saying, your conversation with Sam, uh, what you were saying that there's a big chicken and egg problem regarding DNA and protein is not a controversial concept. Everybody on all sides recognizes this chicken and egg issue, but when you were talking with Sam the other day on this hangout, he was trying to make it sound as if that wasn't really a problem or as big of a problem. And he was trying to make it sound like you were crazy, and that they were really close to solving it or whatnot. It just goes to show that when these guys don't have the evidence, they don't consider the idea that the evidence is actually on our side or pointing in our favor.
Yeah.
The very fact that because scientists are working on it, that's good enough for them.
That's right. That's
you know
right.
What I mean?
Yeah. That makes it true. And the reason that demonstrates that they're operating on a presupposition. Nature had to have produced man because I refuse to acknowledge God did. Therefore, it did happen. We just don't have the pieces yet.
Right, and that's how most of the scientific community thinks, and so it's no wonder that none of the evidence, I'm using that in quotes, points towards creationism. It's because they rule out creation a priori.
Absolutely.
Can I just say one thing?
Yeah, go ahead, Gary.
Much of what I've been reading lately, and this is from mainstream science, it's just not said a lot or spoken of a lot because it's kind of embarrassing for them. A lot of people are now leaning towards at least intelligent design. They may not say God, but they're still thinking that, some of this stuff does sort of seem...
Well, I don't know about that in the peer review literature, but in the real world, they certainly are.
Yeah, you've got scientists like Richard Dawkins acknowledging that it could be that some alien life form far more advanced than us has produced us, and so they're willing to admit intelligent design. Maybe some of them, publicly, but not in the journals like you said.
Right. Yeah, that's actually what I meant. Yeah, I meant that that their personal opinions may not be presenting it in their papers, but their opinions are starting to move towards intelligent design.
I think it's inevitable that it's going to continue to do so because the complexities and interdependencies that they find in the cell are just only going to increase, and the whole idea of abiogenesis is just going to become, although I will say outright, it's been disproven because it's been proven to be mathematically, scientifically, chemically impossible. It's just not going to ever happen. But nonetheless, I think that the evidence is just going to continue to mount so heavy and so weighty against the abiogenesis idea that the scientific community is just going to give up on it. And many already have and already starting to talk about panspermia in their science papers. But panspermia doesn't necessarily mean aliens brought it here. So it's just they're going to give up on it. I think eventually they're going to have to give up on it. But the sad thing is, when they do, they're not going to point to Jesus Christ and say, well, he's the one that made it. They'll still deny he made it. They'll be willing to acknowledge aliens made us from some other world. Oh, well, how could they have gotten here, if it takes 100 million years to fly here from some, alpha, beta, or whatever. We don't know how they could have done it. They're aliens. They got the technology. They can do it. So, maybe that's plausible, but Jesus Christ, no, man, no way.
I think that the minute they do that, though, the minute they invoke aliens, I think they will be laughed off the planet. Because we've never found aliens, for one thing, but even so, that would certainly imply that, that they're conceding that it is intelligent design, maybe not from God, but they're kind of folding on their core belief that it's natural. And so I think the average person would be able to see right through it, that that's just a complete moving of the goalposts.
Yeah, but Tommy, I wonder. I fear that by the time they finally do give up the game on it, there's going to come a man called the son of perdition in the Bible, and he's going to come along and show miracles and
Oh
power
yeah, exactly.
supernatural on this earth, and people are going to fall for it. And he's going to claim to be our creator, and and then all the scientific community will say, "Well, there you go, he's the one," because they're going to love what he has to say. He's going to say, "Do what thou will." You know, I never told you that was immoral. Where'd you get this idea, y'all? You guys, you know, you got my message to you wrong. You know, the Hebrews didn't get it right. You know, the Hindus didn't get it right. You all got it wrong, but you got a little bit of it right. But you know, I do love you. Sure, he does. You know.
Hey, Vescott, brother. Good to see you again. How are you
Hey,
doing?
been a little while.
Yeah, how you been doing?
Well, pretty good.
Good.
Yeah, I saw that video you had on that where you talked to that atheist, where you showed him that he was spouting his beliefs,
Yeah.
you know, about faith, and they were going, no, it was all scientific. We didn't say,
Mm.
No,
They
but
get very upset when you
Yeah.
point out to an atheist that the things that they believe that they declare science, there actually is a philosophy in which they have a tremendous blind faith. They get very upset by that.
I think I was saying, he said that the RNA and DNA have similar chemical reactions, and then he says, I don't have any problem seeing how that could switch up. Right there was a statement of belief.
Yeah.
And he doesn't recognize it. He thinks it's science because he said RNA and DNA and chemical reaction, so therefore he thinks his statement is science. But it was belief, you know.
And that's true. And also his statement that DNA is basically nothing but two RNAs bound together with a ribose sugar backbone is false. It is much more complex than that. A DNA strand is not the same thing as an RNA. It is a nested, overlapping information strand hopping and reversible. And that is not the properties of RNA. An RNA is merely a transcript of the DNA. The DNA itself is a package of information that has overlying codes and system of codes lying on top of codes, sharing base pairs running down the length of the molecule in different locations with regulatory factors. It is not the same thing as two RNAs. But the evolutionists will equate it that way to make it seem simple. You know, they love to dumb down biology, the astonishing complexity of biology, because if they think that if they make it sound far simpler than it really is, well, then it's believable that it could form naturally. So they love to dumb it down.
Right, but you pointed out real well that he was saying, you know, he said those things, you know, he dumbed it down like you said, and then he admitted that there was no model that showed that it happened, but he said I could see how it could happen. So what I'm saying is he pointed out real well that it was his belief.
Well, if he can see how it could happen, why didn't he write a science paper, publish in the journal, and enlighten all the scientists about it?
Well, because but you pointed out what it was. It was his belief. It wasn't science.
Right.
Hey, Brother Vescott, I wanted to ask you something. Do you see the message that I sent you in the side chat?
Oh, yeah, I do now.
Okay, yeah, because the person sounds just like you, man. I really hope that you would meet him one day. You know.
I don't know. Yeah, I don't know who he is.
All right, maybe if you have that program,
yeah.
You know, maybe I can invite you over sometime.
Okay, I'll have to look at it and see.
Let me make a point here about this research that he was referring to. That fellow I was debating the other night. It was research by Gerald Joyce, and about where they in a laboratory using intelligent design got RNA to self-catalyze, and this is what he doesn't understand is here's one thing that Joyce said about this thing. He's one of the leading researchers of RNA world hypothesis. He himself has said, and I quote, "The most reasonable assumption is that life did not start with RNA. The transition to RNA world, like the origins of life in general, is fraught with uncertainty and plagued by a lack of experimental data." Now, that's from the very researcher who produced the catalytic RNAs that my debater was citing as supposed evidence that RNA could be the basis for the origin of life. And here, that very same researcher is saying that he doesn't believe it's possible that life could have started with RNA. So, you know, I just think that's funny.
Yeah, I mean, Well, the whole thing is like you were pointing out to them that he was just stating what he believed. You know, he said, you know, science shows this and science shows a little bit of this, but you know, we don't have any models to prove that it's true. But I think that it could happen.
Yeah.
And so that was his statement of belief, like you were pointing out. And I think that they don't even see that. That's what's crazy.
Yeah. There's an interesting article, excuse me, about this subject by Jonathan Sarfati, a PhD physical chemist, on creation.com. I'll paste the text for you in case you wanted to read that in the text chat. Jonathan Sarfati is a physical chemist, and he's a bona fide genius. That an article in which he very briefly debunks the whole RNA hypothesis thing.
Hey, I put something over here as well, Neff, about this. It's a link from SciTech Daily, and it's about this RNA world hypothesis. But it says, and this is from the scientific community, that their own people are going after it. And this particular write-up says that. But for this hypothesis to be correct, meaning the RNA world, it says ancient RNA catalysts would have to have copied multiple sets of RNA blueprints nearly as accurately as do modern-day enzymes. That's a hard sell. Scientists calculate that it would take much longer than the age of the universe for randomly generated RNA molecules to evolve sufficiently to achieve the modern level of sophistication.
Wow.
Given Earth's age of 4.5 billion years, living systems run entirely by RNA could not have reproduced and evolved either fast or accurately enough to give rise to the vast... Anyway, so he goes on to say, the RNA world hypothesis is extremely unlikely. It would take forever.
Awesome.
So
great.
Next time somebody just post that for him. But the funny thing is, people like Sam, those people are experts at sounding authoritative and making it sound like that it's doable. Like you were saying, he dumbs it down, or tries to make life seem dumber than it actually is, so that it makes sense in your head. But in reality, it's nothing of the sort. There's lots of different problems. It's not just the problem of finding a replicator. They've got lots of problems, and they don't even know what life is. I mean, let's be honest. They don't know what it is that would need to come together exactly to make life happen. They could cut open a cell, let all the content spill out, and they would have all the all the ingredients for life. But then what do you do with it? How do you make it all work?
Right.
So even if they had all those ingredients at the time, making life happen is a totally different deal.
Oh yeah.
They have to put it in the right order,
I thought it was interesting you used
Not even every molecule. I see vitamin C doesn't equal to vitamin C, meaning natural vitamin C does not equal to synthetic vitamin C. Did you know this? Vitamin C synthetically produced can actually produce cancer, or enhance the risk of getting cancer, whilst the natural one doesn't. So even the molecules that are produced synthetically, the vitamins, which is very easy to do, really, if you think about it comparatively.
That's why I like the whole food. The whole food as God produced it or created it is the way to go. All these vitamins that are sold in pill form and these containers at the store that you can get.
Right.
I've never been a fan of those. I've always been a fan of the whole apple or the whole orange.
Right, and there's a funny thing about that. You also need fibers. That's also the important part of it.
Right. And then you can see exactly how, even though the molecular, because the reactions they think are the same, now it has the same number of hydrogen atoms, the same number of carbon atoms, the same number of other atoms required in almost the exact same location, but still you do see now that even the molecule does not bind in the exact same locations by necessity. That's my point really here. So the atheists, see, that's why otherwise, even there, God is showing the atheists, look, the natural vitamin C, although it has the exact same number of atoms that you used to try to imitate my molecule, which is so simple compared to all the other stuff in the cell, you can't really do it that effectively.
That's not only that, Johnny, but the nucleotides, the base pairs, the nucleotides in the DNA molecule, and the amino acids in a protein chain are not bound to each other in any particular order by chemical necessity either. So how did it become encoded? You know what I mean?
Exactly.
Where did the coding come from? Because it's not chemical necessity that makes forces their arrangement. How did it become encoded? That's the problem. Somebody coded that thing. Chemistry didn't do
Aliens.
it.
Yeah, which were then further caused by other aliens, and so
Well,
on.
the thing is, has anybody witnessed where the aliens come from? If there
No,
is any aliens, has
we don't
anybody
even know.
witnessed them actually coming, from some other place?
You don't have enough blind faith, man.
So the whole point, that's what I'm saying.
Nothing like that. Not even that that planets even exist out there. It's just
Right.
speculation that they could
Right. They
exist.
say, well, because there's so many billions of stars, I believe there's got to be some other life.
Right. Just
Right.
speculation.
Okay, but you can't have faith what was written down
Right.
and proven to be true through archaeology and
Right.
world history. You don't.
Right.
Come on, really.
That's right. The written language, the history, that's not good enough. But the stars, with all their ambiguity,
Speculation of stars.
they are enough information to tell them that there's very likely to have aliens out there somewhere.
Right.
It's ridiculous.
Because the odds go higher. Yeah, so they'd rather bet on the odds than the actual facts.
Nice.
But that's science to them. To them, that's science.
Yeah, that's right. To get as far away from the Bible as possible is science. You can actually see the bias in the scientific community, which goes against purposely against the Bible. The majority of things are deliberately done against what the Bible teaches. It's not just, some random things go against the Bible and others match it. No, it's diametrically opposed in certain instances, very significantly.
And they don't even realize that they stole the scientific method from the Christians, from the Bible itself.
Oh yeah, that too. But then using it against it.
Yeah. So it's just willful ignorance.
Right. Yeah, Vesca, brother, I heard you also talking. Are you you and Brother Neff, I think, were discussing Calvinism some time back. I don't exactly remember the details. I've come out of Calvinism, in case you didn't know, about 3.5 to 4 weeks ago now. I'm an ex-Calvinist, so to speak. I've made a couple of videos. I just wanted to ask you, do you see some relationship of how the Calvinists place their arguments and the evolutionists put forward theirs?
I'm sorry, I didn't catch your last word. What did you say?
Do you see a relationship of how the Calvinists put forward their arguments and the evolutionists? Do you see kind of a relation there of how they use ad hoc explanations to try to justify when pressed on certain issues?
Well, that's what I was trying to point out before. I couldn't remember what I noticed, but this guy showed me the Calvinist position and showed me all these verses in the Bible.
Mm-hmm.
And when I actually went to the Bible and looked it up myself, then I realized he skipped all the verses about being in the spirit.
Mm-hmm.
Everything was about in the flesh. The King James says, "In the flesh, man can't receive God." The flesh fights against God,
mm-hmm.
but my spirit, it may groan for God. And so there's a difference between the flesh not wanting God and your spirit recognizing that you need God, and maybe you can't get there. Of course,
Right.
You can't get there without Him. We know that, but it doesn't mean that you don't have your own choice in it, because your spirit can decide a choice.
Exactly. The thing is, the Calvinists believe that the spirit is completely dead. This is what they make this argument, but I don't believe that anymore. I believe that we are a dichotomous being, spirit, soul, and body, although soul does refer to the entirety of the whole in certain verses, but in other verses there's a distinction made. I don't believe that the spirit is really dead. The spirit is well alive, just like the flesh, and can make choices. You see?
Right. It is, and that's what it says in Romans. They pick all those verses out of Romans, but they skip all the things about the spirit. In his spirit, he knows the right thing to do, but he can't do it because of the sin in him. The flesh holds him back.
That's
doing
right.
the right thing. Even I think even as a non-Christian, your spirit, knows the right thing to do. But especially as a non-Christian, you can't do the right thing.
That's right. That's why the spirit can respond to the call of God, and He draws all men. That's what Calvinists miss out completely.
Yeah, but I think on the other hand, I don't think you can just lose your salvation. Like, what is the Armenian point of view?
Yeah, that's why I'm a,
Don't do no. There's a happy in between there.
exactly. I'm a once saved,
Yeah.
always saved Bible
Yeah.
believer. Yeah.
I
So
don't know why people. Well, that's just part of the end times. I've been realizing is that people are going to exaggerate what God said and trying to make their own. And it's been hard on me recently to realize too that there is I forget which verse it is. I didn't know I was going to talk about it. I didn't look it up or anything, but it says that God will give them the power to defeat His people for a while, for a short period. So in the end times, it's going to be hard to feel like we're winning, And the point is, because like we have, they won the marriage, question, and why is that? Well, it's because God is going to show them that, hey, this is what it's really like. Here it is. You said you wanted it. Well, I'm going to give it to you.
okay.
But we have to. I don't know. That's what I've seen. And so my point is that I've seen more and more religious exaggeration of the Bible, and I don't know, the new versions. Some of the words, some of the words are better, but then over here they leave out, God's blood. They change things entirely. It's like
the thing is, it's very significant. You see, I used to think first that no, this is a conspiracy. I used to believe with James White. They were my big guys. I looked up to them, and I thought, oh man, this guy is so logical. But then I kind of looked at the NIV, the NASB, and there are some passages that are in all places consistently, almost, with perhaps one exception, translated to words where it looks like it's changing the doctrine.
Right. So
that is not a coincidence anymore.
No, it may sound better. In some places they may have better modern up-to-date words.
Okay, that's fine.
But then they use that to trick you into thinking that everything is right, and it's not. I mean, that's Satan's plan. Is he always uses, it's the yin and the yang. He's always good with the bad. That's how you perpetuate a lie. Is you always put the good, something good in there, and then you sneak in the lie behind it.
Right. The ESV, for example, is very agenda-driven in regards to lordship salvation. You see.
Yeah.
Quite a few things, actually.
We have these biases in these Bibles. Some of them are pretty obvious. Others are more subtle. You see.
Right. Have you ever heard of someone adding "as above, so below" to the Bible?
A what?
Oh, really? I haven't heard that.
Yeah, that's in the ESV.
What did they add?
As above, so below.
As above, so below.
Because there's a verse that says, "As it is in heaven, as it in on earth," right? And it replaces that with "as above, so below."
Oh, well, how exactly does it? I'm not too sure how that changes the doctrine in relation.
Well,
maybe.
That's amazing.
Okay, it's a Luciferian term.
Yeah.
That Aleister Crowley.
It's a term indicating that it's related to the angels coming down and mating with the women of the world. So it's the blending of the fallen angels with the humans on Earth. That's what it's an indicator of.
Okay, I guess that's one way. Usually, I was pretty sure it had to do with up in heaven is the same as down in hell. It's like.
Well, I could refer to that too.
Yeah, it's. I mean, they think of things super occulty,
Right.
Yeah. Well.
I guess who really knows, right?
No, they know. I mean, it probably does have multiple meanings.
Yeah.
That's the whole point is that the fallen angels are to mess up God's creation.
Yeah. Like I said, I mean, some things,
they
can.
say.
Yeah, they like to
Right. In some cases, they can say that this is just a word that can mean, because the Bible does have, for example, the serpent. In one sense, it says, "Be wise like a serpent." That is a commandment to us Christians. Meek like a dove, but wise like a serpent. Then on other places, it says, "Satan is the serpent." So
Right.
we understand that words, an animal, can be used in a certain sentence to refer to its positive points and another its negative points. That can happen. But there are certain sentences that I've clearly seen are structured deliberately, because it's not just a one-time thing. Otherwise, I would say, okay, here he translates it as this, in another verse he's going to change it. But certain things we see consistently being translated a certain way that changes the doctrine. Once I witnessed that, then I said, man, like for example, with Jesus Christ, I think there's the word consistently, or for in the majority of places, as far as I witnessed, that was I think in the NIV, it became from worship to bow down. And of course, we understand bowing down, one can bow down before a king as a respect.
Right.
That doesn't necessarily mean that they are God. But when you say worship, that
Right.
obviously implies deity. It's only one true God who's in question here.
Right. So, yeah, I've seen that. I mean, yeah,
Right.
worship is a whole different thing than just bowing down. People
Mm-hmm.
people can bow down and not want to worship, you know.
Right. Right.
So, yeah, it's very subtle like that. You're saying.
You'd be surprised how many Christians read the passages in the Bible that explain that angels came to this earth and mated with human being women, and don't believe it. I don't get that. Why don't you believe it? Genesis says it, and Jude 1 says it. I had one Christian friend that I was fairly close to, a young fella. He was much younger than me. He was in his early 20s. He was real good at refuting evolution. And he did not agree with me. He thought where it said, where the sons of God came unto the daughters of men, he thought this mean the sons of God means normal, mortal human beings. And I tried to show him, look, the passage itself is making a clear distinction. This is clear distinction. Look, over here on one side you've got sons of God, and on the other you've got daughters of men. It's telling you these sons of God are not men. They're not humans. Besides that, the passages, and there are other passages in the Bible that say the sons of God, they shouted for joy when God created the earth and mankind, right? That they sang
Obviously.
in holy chorus. And so what are those? They weren't mortal men, because there were no mortal men on the earth at the
The
time.
term Ben Elohim, the Jewish people always understood them in reference to the angels. It's a non-Jewish thing.
Yeah. And he got so upset with this that he pretty much disowned me, removed me from Skype contacts, and just shut out. And I'm like, wow, man, what?
Yeah, sometimes people exaggerate, because he would probably say, "Oh, just because the Roman Catholic Church, they made that the sons of God into." No, it's not all. They have got something right. The Roman Catholics haven't got everything wrong.
Yeah, they have a few things right,
Right, right.
Well,
Yeah, but
We look at things individually. We
the
don't just say,
Bible's
"Oh, the Roman Catholics did it, so it must be wrong." We have
right.
to.
The Bible's very clear on the matter. The sons of Jude 1 tells us that these beings are the angels which kept not their first habitation, and that it says that they are even wandering spirits now. They're demons. It tells them that when they feast with you, they're like clouds moving through the wind, twice dead, plucked up. It's describing spirit beings in those passages. And if you read that, it's pretty interesting. Jude 1 is pretty interesting passages on that matter. You ever wonder why the book of Jude is so short? God gave inspired word, but he gave just a little bit to Jude, and it was real profound stuff, though.
Yeah, that's pretty significant.
well, maybe that, I don't know. People, have different. Some people will read something short but not something long. So maybe that's why he had short books and long books.
Well, I guess it could simply be that God had a very special, simple message for Jude to convey, and he gave it to him, and that was it,
Yeah. Well, it's a simple message, but sometimes it's hard for us to understand it.
Yeah, it's quite clear on that matter. Let me read just a few lines from it here. See here. Here it says, now it mentions them as Sodom and Gomorrah. It says, even as Sodom and Gomorrah, and the cities left them around about in like manner, gave themselves over to fornication, going after strange flesh, and set forth an example, suffering the vengeance of eternal fire. Now, who is an eternal fire? That's God. That's not the lake of fire. Not the torment of the wicked. That's God. For our God is a consuming fire, even a jealous God. Likewise, also these filthy dreamers defile the flesh, despise the meaning, and speak evil of dignities. He's talking about people filled with demonic spirits here. And he says, yet Michael and the archangel, when contended with the devil, he disputeth about the body of Moses, durst not bring railing against him, but accusation, but said, the Lord rebuke thee. But these speak evil of those things which they don't know. But what they know naturally as brute beasts, in those things they corrupt themselves as brute beasts. Now consider that. That is very much like what the Word of God says about Jesus when he was on the cross. Remember when Jesus was on the cross, the Word says that he saw many bulls of Bashan here in Psalms. Remember Psalms describes the crucifixion of Christ. It says many bulls of Bashan beset around him.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Okay, bulls of Bashan. These are demons. He's referring to demons. The spirits of the dead Nephilim is what that's a reference to. And here we see it again in Jude 1 as brute beasts, and they corrupt themselves. Woe unto them, says, having gone the way of etc. And it says, these are spots in your feasts of purity when they feast with you, feeding themselves without fear. Clouds they are without water. What is a cloud without water? It's nothing that you can see, right? Carried about by the winds. Remember what Jesus said to Nicodemus? Well, the spirit's like the wind. It goes this way, that way. You can't see it. Remember he said, if I tell you about earthly things, how are you going to understand heavenly things? Right? He said, carried about by the wind. So this is likened to what Jesus said about spirits being like the wind. You can feel it going. You know where it is, but you can't see it. And he says, trees with fruit, whose fruit withereth, without fruit, twice dead. Now, why are they twice dead? They're twice dead because once they died physically. The Nephilim physically died. And now they're dead again because they're dead unto God. They're doomed to die the second death in the lake of fire, plucked up by the roots. Raging waves of the sea, foaming out their own shame. Boy, these are angry beasts, aren't they? These are angry. This is anger. These things are conveyed. Raging of the sea, foaming out their shame. Wandering stars, to whom is reserved the blackness and darkness forever. And Enoch also, the seventh from Adam. Now it's talking about pre-flood world, what happened before the flood. Remember, Enoch was a prophet before the flood took place. Prophesied of these, saying, behold, the Lord come with 10,000s of the saints to execute judgment upon all, etc., etc. And then he goes on to say, where's the passage about angels which kept not their first estate? Hold on, I passed that. Yeah, before all this, it said, and angels which kept not their first estate, but left their own habitation, he hath reserved in everlasting chains under darkness unto the great day of judgment. Then it began, yes, even as Sodom and Gomorrah and the cities around them. So one verse back, if I had started in line 6, I would have mentioned that where it says angels which kept not their first estate. Estate, that means habitation. That means they left the holy realm. So anyway, it's interesting how God's word is so interdependent upon it. It refers to other passages. You can find this little reference to something in something Jesus said. You can find it in Psalms. You know what I mean? And here we got it in Jude again, reiterating the same things. I think that's one of the most fascinating things about the Bible, that it does that, and it's interwoven like that. I think that's absolutely marvelous. So what are we going to talk about? Who's got something to put on the table?
Well, I think it is kind of interesting, though, that people, the atheists are always trying to say, the Bible isn't science, and it's not this, and it's not that, and it's contradictory. But the Bible is like any other book. It assumes that you know certain things. And like like you were saying, it's all interwoven. You know, how did you know? How did you find out it was interwoven? You said you read more than one book.
Exactly.
Right? Read more than one area. You've read the, you know, the whole
Yeah.
thing, and that's just like, you know, anything historical, anything that's true, it's going to be, you know, assume that you already know certain things.
Yeah,
It's going to be
exactly, man.
interwoven like that.
I also, Brother Niflin Free, I wanted to ask you, do you see, in regards to ad hoc explanations, do you see some similarities also between the atheists, evolutionists, and the Calvinists? Or they both try to use ad hoc explanations to justify their preconceived notions?
That's always true, I think, of people who put forth beliefs that they hold ardently to, but don't actually hold water. I think that's true no matter what false belief it is. People who hold to a thing that's not supportable by a presupposition, they all do that. And yes, I do. So therefore, there's definitely a similarity in the way Calvinists treat the Bible and the way evolutionists treat their beliefs about what has happened without evidence. Yeah.
Well, may I? Because I've spent hours, and I'm still not a Calvinist, so just relax. I've spent hours talking to One Way, for example, and yeah, mostly Russ, but you know, he always has something that he will quote from the Bible to back himself up. Do I agree? No, I don't. And I think there are better ways of seeing what he's quoting. And so, I mean, I think it's just a matter of, you know, they want a little more security than the Bible really. You know, the Bible gives you plenty of security. It's just that you gotta read it, and you gotta really, and then you gotta put your whole heart into it. And some people just want to have something a little quicker, a little easier. So it's just a matter of talking, I think. With a lot of them, there are a lot of them that are just closed. I met a bunch of them here not long ago. They're, you know, when I talk, for example, to, and yeah, I know, Matt Yester and Russ, they'll both admit there is a possibility they're wrong.
What? Oh, I'm sure he does.
But I was in a hangout here not long ago with a bunch of fellas, and they, when I asked the same question, they unanimously said, "No, we're not wrong. You're wrong." When you get that kind of attitude, then there's a problem. And I think on any side, because on this side of the veil, we can't be as certain as sometimes we sound. All right? That's my belief. That's all.
Right. Well, yeah, Gary, but think about this also. I mean, sometimes the person who outright says, "Hey, I'm right, you're wrong," is less dangerous than the one who says, "Well, I'm kind of open to things," because remember, he can be deceiving you, he can be tricking you, and he wants to be
Crying
nice.
out loud, Johnny. No, I'm not saying that in these particular people.
No, I'm just letting you know as a general knowledge.
You're
I'm not.
talking to me like a baby is the problem.
Well, it's not that I'm talking, because there are many adult people who miss certain points. So it's not meant to be that way at all. Oh, I think he left. But Gary, listen, if you watch this later on, no, I didn't have that intention. Sorry you felt that way, but that was not my intention. The problem is, sometimes, you know, people I miss things. And I'm grateful when somebody gives me some information. I say, man, had I thought of this before. Iron sharpens iron, right?
Right. No, that's the whole point of discussion is to take a look at things at a different angle we hadn't really looked at before. And so that discussion is a good thing, you know. I mean, as long as you're trying to discuss and not just force your point upon somebody.
Right, but there are some. I mean, there's some important things, some vital things. Like, for example, when the Calvinists they undermine the very image of God, then of course I think we need to take a harder stance, because they make the God who is love into a God who is only loving to a minority of human beings made in His image. Doesn't make it. That is a great slander on the character of God right there.
Oh no, I'm not talking about not taking a hard stance. I'm just saying you can only take a stance, and then you have to realize that they have to make a decision. And a lot of people that I've talked to about Calvinism, he just, he's like pounding. It's like if I don't believe what he says, then there's something wrong with me, or I have to believe what he says, or I don't know. But when I just make a discussion, and most of the people here is you can't force it into their head. You can only say it and let it soak in, right? That's what I meant. That's what I'm talking about, forcing. I'm not saying not take a hard stand. You have to take a hard stand when it's time. Does that make any sense? Right. Anybody hear me? Am I okay with that statement?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, gotcha.
Yeah.
Because, I think that is a problem with the church nowadays, is that we don't take a hard stance on anything.
Mm-hmm. That's true.
We're just like, oh yeah, but we know that, but I love you.
Mm-hmm.
It's just love, that's all.
Well, liberalism is part of the reason. Liberalism affects people's thinking, and when they become liberal in their thinking, then they treat everything with a liberal view, and including the Bible. That's
right. I mean, but love isn't always nice. I mean, you have to push people to, to learn how to work. I guess in a sense, it's like a football team. I didn't know, or any kind of team, I didn't know how well I could do till the coach got mad at me and yelled at me and made me work harder. You see what I'm saying? I didn't think I could do as well, and I didn't realize I could push myself beyond what I was. And it wasn't the niceness that got me to do it; it was the meanness. So, I mean, mean isn't necessarily not love. There's a good and bad side of everything.
Yeah, there's a time to chase it, which can be good in certain instances.
Yeah, toughness can work under certain circumstances.
Well, it's a mixture. It's God did not say don't get angry. He said don't let the sun go down on your wrath. So anger has a purpose, and I think anger is good because it gets you emotionally motivated to do the right thing. If you guide it in the right area, you can either just use it to yell for nothing and accomplish nothing, or you can use it to push yourself to do the right thing and get something done about what you're angry about.
Right.
And get it done right, and not. So it's not the thing that is a bad thing. It's how you use the thing.
Well, no, when I'm talking to Calvinists, and really it could be about any subject, I try to put myself in their shoes. Not only because I want to know the truth. I mean, to me, it's all about, the investigation of what's actually true. So I want to put myself in their shoes and try to see things their way, just so, I can weigh the truthfulness of it. But also, now I'm not a Calvinist, but it helps me, I think, if I'm going to debate the issue. If you can see exactly where they're coming from, then it would actually help you be a better debater or a better defender of your position.
Absolutely.
So that's why, when I get into it with Calvinists or hopefully even evolutionists or whatever, I'm trying to come at it from an angle of trying to see it from their point of view, just so I can be more effective and in defending my point of view. So I think we can get all get dug in with our positions, and I don't know if anger is the right term, but we can be sure of ourselves, and I don't think that Calvinism is the truth. I don't know exactly what the truth is, but it's not Calvinism, I don't believe. But I think seeing it from other people's point of view isn't necessarily a bad thing.
Yeah, the thing, one of the biggest problems with Calvinism, apart from limited atonement, is the love. See, God's attribute is not just being loving, like he says he's merciful, he's just, but he is love. And the Calvinists downplay God's love significantly. Very significantly. That's the biggest problem, because that takes away the core element of God in Christianity.
Yes, love is a natural attribute of God. It's part of him, of his character. It's who he is. And the Calvinist God is not a loving God. He's an evil monster. He's a being which would create. See, it gets a little contorted. The Calvinist says that, well, God, because God knows what people, whether people will accept his message or not, means that it could only have been that God made them that way, because God knows everything. And so God knew that they would come out that way and chose to make them that way anyway. Therefore, God made them that way. See, that's false. I think that's faulty logic. The truth is, God knowing in advance what that person will do with their life or beliefs does not necessitate that God made them in that way. God could make somebody knowing full well that they will reject him and do it anyway. It doesn't mean God willed them to be that way. So, but the Calvinists believe that their belief about God is that God created millions of people, presumably, for the purpose of being condemned, and they declare this glorifies God. That it glorifies God to torment and destroy millions of people.
Well, yeah, and what you said is correct. The gate is wide. The path is wide for destruction, and so not only is it millions of people, it's the vast majority of people.
That's right.
Would be going to their destruction, because not of their own, decisions or beliefs, but because of what God willed them to be.
Right.
It's philosophically. I think it throws Christianity completely under the bus because of the whole topic of evil. I mean, free will, I think, is what, philosophically anyway, if we're going with that, is what absolves Christianity of the issue of evil, or I believe it does. But without that, boy, the other side can just run roughshod over Christianity and even rightfully so. I believe, if God's causing all the misery and terrible stuff in the world, all the murders, all the wars, all the rapes and killing and all of that, I mean, they're in the right to say that this is immoral. And so for that reason alone, it's a big problem.
Yeah, and another trick that the Calvinists play at this point is they talk about free will. You got to be careful, because they will say that one has free will, but their free will really is a compatibilist, not a real contra-causal free will. In other words, it's a will that is free in the sense of you do what you want to do, but your very desire was dictated by God ultimately, either directly or indirectly through secondary causes. So they play that compatibilist game that the atheists play as well.
Yeah, it sounds like a goalpost move, sort of.
Oh yeah, most assuredly.
I think the definition of love, the ultimate definition, what I think of love, is that God chose to love us, even though we were yet sinners, because everybody was a sinner,
right?
Was going to be a sinner, I guess, when they decided that Jesus was going to die on the cross, and he dies on the cross for everybody. Being a sinner at the time, he didn't say, okay, I'm going to pay for their sins after they come to me and after they show me they're going to be, he chose to love before we chose to love him.
That's right.
And that's the whole thing. That's the thing that people don't understand about marriage these days, is we're all about falling in love, and and how wonderful it is to fall in love. And once you fall in love, you fall out. The truest love is I choose you, and I'm going to love you no matter what, because I know in the future your bad things are going to wear on me, and I know you have bad things, and I know you have good things, and so I'm going to love you despite all of that. And that's what true love is to choose to love.
That's right.
No matter what the cost.
That's why Christ Jesus has forgiven all sins at the cross except one, that is blasphemy of the Holy Spirit, which is the rejection of that very offer itself. That's the only sin that hasn't been forgiven. And that's where Calvinists they always falter. I've seen that. I asked one Calvinist the other day, I asked, okay, will there be human beings in hell who haven't committed blasphemy of the Holy Spirit? And he said, oh, well, the question is not really phrased with a yes or no. I said, no, please answer me that question. And when I hammered him, eventually he got to say, well, no, not necessarily, or something like that. So then I said, no, it is necessary. So because the Bible doesn't. Then he says, no, that was only for that time. That sin doesn't even exist. If you ask most of the Calvinists today, they say that doesn't even exist. Well, if it doesn't exist today, then guess what? Then today everybody is going to heaven if they die. It's really that simple. There is no other sin in the Bible that is in the new covenant not forgiven other than the blasphemy of the Holy Spirit, which ties into the rejection, the trampling of Christ's blood under your foot. That is the sin, because now Christ has made, and that shows that God loves everybody, but he makes one condition to become his child and be secured in that love. Just like he says in the Old Testament, there's a passages there, all the princes have become rebellious, I will love them no more. Remember, he says that in the Old Testament. So he even gave them the option there to either have faith and stay in the love of God, to reciprocate the love of God synergistically, and thereby be bound with God forever, or turn away from him and be loved no more and sent off to hell, and rightfully so.
That's true. The entire Bible refutes Calvinism so clearly. That's the weird thing. And Calvinists just seem blinded to it because they want so desperately to believe what they do. I mean, why would God say things like, if any man call my name, anyone who calls upon Jesus Christ will be saved? Well, why does it say anyone that will? Well, the Calvinist answers that by saying, well, the anyone is not really everyone good. It means those who God had predestined would do it. Well, then what sense would it make for God to say, to predetermine exactly who can or cannot call upon him, and then say, you guys call upon me and I won't cast you out? Duh. It just makes no sense. Calvinism is so obviously false by so much that is in the Bible. I mean, even Jesus Christ quoted the Old Testament, and he said, "Oh Jerusalem, Jerusalem, how oft I would have gathered you under my wings like a hen gathers her chicks, but you would not." What is God trying to call them to do if he's already determined that they're going to do or not do a thing anyway? It makes no sense. It's like a guy. It's utterly stupid. It's like somebody saying, gee, I didn't give you the comic books, so you couldn't possibly read one, but I pleaded with you to read the comic book you never had.
Let me give you another analogy, brother. Let's say us 5 people in here, we made an animation, right? An animated movie, and we made an interactive kind of animation. So we have like World of Warcraft, for example. We make something like that, and we decide, okay, these are going to become the bad guys, these are going to become the good guys. We set everything up, the environment, what have you, everything. And what we even do is to justify the Calvinist position that in the beginning all of them are good. So all our characters start off being good. Even the ones, so we have these guys over here, they're good, then we have these other guys over there, they're good too. And then as time passes by within the animation, some of them become bad. And it looks like they're really choosing to become bad, right? Because we have given them all these emotions. And at the very end, what happens after the war is over and everything is done, we then come inside the animation, okay, attach ourselves to the virtual reality, and we say, okay, guys, now it's judgment time. Now we're going to judge you. You did wrong. didn't you? You didn't follow the commandments. Oh, what did you? All this time, but we have programmed everything from the beginning. Would that make any sense for us to judge? Would that make any sense at all for us to come inside that animation and act as judges? At best, we would be faking it. At best, we would just be playing an act. So unless the Calvinist wants to make God an actor and not a real judge, they would have to believe in libertarian free will.
Right.
There you go.
Yep.
I just slammed the whole thing down.
Well, I mean, what's the point of judgment if it's all predetermined? God is basically judging his own actions based on his own predetermined.
Exactly. God is not. He's acting.
It makes a mockery out of judging or the justice system that God.
Exactly. God is an actor. He's acting it. See, even when he cried, the Calvinists say it's all anthropomorphism. You see, in the Old Testament, God said he repented. No, that's not really repented. It's just, I mean, he didn't really have those feelings. It's just, he's just using human language. See, they're already going in that direction, and that's exactly what Islam does. That's exactly what a sect of Jewish rabbis did. They're trying to anthropomorphize. Islam takes that to another extreme. Calvinist makes it its extreme too. You see, there's a direct correlation with these heresies.
There's something about the human race that hates the notion of freedom. And, you know, they're determinists, just like all atheists are. And there's something about this whole determinism. You know, it's just all throughout science.
Right.
And I don't understand. I mean, to me, free will is so. I mean, even if we are determined, it certainly appears that we have free will.
What?
So, you know, to me, I'm a real simple guy. So to me, if it sounds like a duck, acts like a duck, walks like a duck, it's probably a duck. But you know, there's something about this whole determinism thing, and liberalism is mixed in there somewhere as well. But maybe determinism and liberalism goes together. I don't know, but they seem to kind of go together because a lot of these Calvinists and atheists are liberals, you know, or a lot of them lean that way anyway.
Well, that's what they're now. The thing is, Calvinists used to be very, very. At least they pretended they were so hyper-conservative that they burned people at the stake. Remember when Calvin he burned?
Because they wanted to control people, just like liberals.
Right,
Yeah.
but they pretended. I see what you're saying now. So they pretend to be on the outside, to be very free, to give you all kinds of freedom. But what they really want to do, and you actually have a point, because there's Christian Reconstructionists. But if you ask them, they say, no, don't worry, theonomy is not going to be that bad. You can compare it to Sharia law. I mean, we are going to be just and fair. But then you actually wait till the system comes about, and then see, you say one word against them, the green wood is going to be prepared.
Well, just like Calvin, you know, his whole civilization, he had, you know, a heavy hand over all of them. He told them how to dress, how to act. You know, they all had to go to church. You know, so they were just as, I don't know if it's a power thing or I don't know. There's a connection there between. I'm not saying Calvinists are atheists or I hate even making that comparison because I think Calvinists are Christians, but there's just some correlation.
Definitely.
The thing about war, because that's what we're in spiritual war, is there's intel, and intel, when you want to confuse the enemy or if you want to, you know, whichever way you're doing it, either confuse them or trick or whatever, you make up like 10 stories that are similar to the true story. And so that's what Satan does. He gets in there and there's a complete opposite story, which is atheism, and then there's all kinds of in-between stories that are just slightly off. In the French Revolution, they had people write 10 books of 10 essential principles, I guess, of Christianity or something. And they all had 9 right, and one of them was wrong. They all had a different one that was wrong, of course. So that confused the issue. And that's the way intel works. And so when we talk about, you know, why do people do this and do that? Well, you know, some people are confused, and some are just working for the enemy. You know, those that introduce these things, and we can't always know what's what. And that's, I guess, you always have to fall back on, you know, that the enemy put in, what was it, sheaves in with the wheat, and the master said he can't pull those weeds up until, you know, everything comes to the harvest.
Here's one thing I think would be interesting for people to question Christians and ask them, When you had your experience, some of whatever experience you've had with God, where you felt God's Holy Spirit come to you and you felt the love of God, and did God ever tell you that, hey, you were chosen before the foundation of the world and you don't have a choice, you're going to be saved? Or did you feel in your heart that God was expressing his love and an offer to you, that he wishes for you to be his child and wants for you to turn to him with love the same way he's trying to give you love? I
think that's
virtually every Christian would say the second, not the first.
Yeah. The thing is, at that moment, although later on I tried to, due to confirmation bias, I tried to reinterpret the event, how I came to Christ. That's what Calvinists are smart, you can do that. But when I just look at it now, I was searching for God already. I believe there was a lot of free will choice involved in that. I was looking for the truth. That was my free will decision. And then God, one day he showed himself to me. He drew me. And at that time, after a week or so, not immediately, but a week after that, I think, I accepted him. I said, yeah, I want to be with you, God. It's the truth. I made my decision synergistically, of course, under the grace of God.
Right. I mean, it's hard to catch an eternal concept sometimes, how God can be in charge of everything and we have free will at the same time.
Yeah, I mean, it's like, for example, God is interactive. See, I see it this way. God has a master plan, and this is how I started off believing, by the way, although I went into the extreme of an open theist. But basically, what I believe is, and I believe this now too, that God has a master plan, and if you deviate from his master plan, like let's say, God doesn't just allow any guy to use their libertarian free will to become a ruling entity, for example. If I try to overthrow a certain ruler right now, God is not going to allow it. He's not going to give me the weaponry. He's not going to give me the recognition that is required in order for that to happen. See, the things like that, you see. If it's not in God's, if it deviates from God's master plan, which would include, for example, not giving certain people enough information for them to come to Christ. God won't allow that, because God wants to give everybody in their own time enough information, I believe, so that they can make an informed decision to either be with Christ Jesus or reject him.
Right, I think he does. Yeah, I mean, I've heard atheists say, well, if God is God, then he would know exactly what to say to...
well, yeah, and he does.
The simplest refutation to Calvinism, I think, is this. How do you get love from an automaton? If God had predestined that certain individuals have no choice, but they will turn to Christ, then the love is fake. It's not genuine love. Real love is given freely of the heart.
Yep.
From one person to another, because one naturally wants to give it. That is love. So if God predestined people to be saved, and they didn't even have a choice, they're going to be saved, they're going to turn to him. God made it so that they have no volition in the matter. Nothing they say matters what's a bit. Hey, Brandon, good to see you.
Amen.
Then their love is not genuine love. It's just God's going to spend eternity with what he's going to call children, which love him only because he forced them to, and then he's going to be satisfied with that somehow. It's nonsense.
Well, and it's deceptive too, because like I was saying earlier, it certainly appears that we have free will. So he's sending people to hell who, it gave them the illusion of free will, but they but they didn't have free will. Yet he's sending them to hell.
Exactly,
for nothing that they did.
According to atheists, it's an illusion. According to Calvinists, it's actually, they call it a delusion. They use a different word, but essentially it's the same thing. You were spot on, brother.
That is a great point, Tommy. That is the perfect point. It is actually deceptive. It makes God into a liar and a deceiver. Not only that, but he's a deceiver because we're commanded to preach the gospel to the whole world, right? So that people might believe and be saved. But then God it's like going up to somebody and saying, hey, if you just put your faith in Jesus Christ, your sins can be washed away and you can have eternal paradise with God. Oh, wait a minute. I'm sorry, I don't know. You might be damned already.
Yeah.
Yeah. God might be spitting at you as I'm in love trying to give you the gospel.
Yeah.
Oh, God hasn't drawn you yet? Oh, you might be damned. So, just wait for God, hang around and see what happens. God may or may not make a move, and so just hang tight and just wait.
Yeah.
Yeah,
look, you got this big pressure over you. Hey, look, you're going to spend most of your life not knowing. You could be going to hell, paradise with God, but on the other hand, you might stand before an almighty, holy God.
But I, on the other hand, am elected. I'm elected. So you may not be. We don't know.
Yeah.
They're not even sure about that. That's the funny, the irony of it all. When the Calvinists say, even James White admitted that he's 99.999% certain that he's an elect, or that Christ died for him, but he's not even 100% sure that Christ died for him. Imagine that.
It's so terrible. It's terrible. It's like saying to somebody, it might be that you don't have a choice in the matter, and it's been forced upon you that you're going to stand before an absolutely holy God, and it's going to be such a terror. The Bible says to you, it's going to be such a terror that it's going to be unfathomably fearful to you. When you stand before Him, you know how guilty you're going to be, and you know He is absolute power, and it's going to be like, oh crap, my number is up. And you know what? It might be that's the case for you. Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to put the pressure on you. Now go on and live your life the rest of your life, worrying and fretting and sweating bullets, but you might know, you're going to stand before God one day and be destroyed. I don't know. It might be the case. You can't do anything about it. Is that some kind of message to give people? Really? Come on.
That's why they package it very well. That's why they know how to package it. They have learned semantics over time. The word game is they're very big on word games, the Calvinists. They are.
Matt Yester was in a hangout. I was with him and I was debating him, and he said to me I said something about something. He said, "Oh, that's election. That's election." And I said something. "Oh, that's justification. That's justification." And it's like he's pulling words out somehow fixes all the holes in Calvinism. That's what they think, and they do the same thing that evolutionists do. Look, abiogenesis has got problems. Oh well, RNA can catalyze. So,
exactly, brother.
It's the same kind of garbage. That's what you hear from the the same garbage you hear from the Calvinist is what you hear from the evolutionist.
Yeah. Yeah, it's just astounding, brother. Once I started to notice these, and the same with the Muslims, by the way. I mean, all these, like you said, all these major cults, they especially significantly, because they are more prominent, right? The more prominent a cult becomes in the world, the more ad hoc explanations, sophisticated ad hoc explanations they have. And this is what impresses people, and that's how they join that club even more. More people join that club or that cult by these pseudo-impressive or pseudo-logical arguments.
That's true. And Johnny, remember the other hangout that we were in, the last one we hang out, we're talking, and you discovered that a piece of video in which Alvin Plantinga, the prominent philosopher of science, he's an eminent philosopher. He's considered one of the greatest philosophers living today, and he's a Christian. You discovered a piece of video in which he admits freely on mic that he's a Calvinist.
Yeah.
He's really good at shooting down atheism, but gee, I didn't know it. He's a Calvinist. What do you know? Now, you know what that does? That just destroys my faith in what in Alvin Plantinga, and I kind of feel the way you do about it. So what if he's really good at refuting Christian atheism? Okay, so what if he's really good at shooting down materialism with philosophy? That's great. But do we need to promote a man who is, even though he is really good at that, and has great academic accolades, and is considered an expert in his field, do we really need to promote him if he's preaching Calvinism? I think not. I think he ought to be. I think we ought to forget about him and chalk him off, write him off the chalkboard, and forget about it. Let's look for apologists who are not putting forth the lies of Calvinism, and yet are also good at shooting down materialistic atheism.
And I'm sure there are many.
We don't have any need or business of promoting a Christian that is just because he's really good at shooting and he's got accolades, tearing down atheism. If he's doing Calvinism at the same time, just forget him. Look for somebody else.
Right, it's just like, I mean, even a Christian, Paul said, for example, a Christian, if he doesn't acknowledge his sin, let's say there's somebody in our community, it's one thing he does a sin, but let's say he says, no, homosexuality is not even a sin. We should then oust him until he repents, until he understands that that is a sin. Otherwise, we shouldn't listen to his arguments or promote him, just like you said. So if these minor, or rather, issues which are not really doctrinal directly, Paul was so strict about them, what makes us think that these guys that go against the nature of God himself, that we should tolerate that in our community and just say, oh, because they use such powerful arguments? How about accepting the Buddhists next, right, and the Roman Catholics too, and the Muslims and everybody else?
And let's look at it in the simplest terms, simplest way possible. You know, your atheism is really stupid. Your materialism is really stupid. But you need to worship my evil God. I mean, really? You need to worship my evil God that predestinated millions of people to be destroyed when they have no choice to it. He made them for the purpose of tormenting them, torturing them, and then killing them. You know, so you need to come out of your atheism and worship my evil monster God. Really? I don't think so. Forget you, Alvin Plantica. Sorry, pal.
Yeah, that's the thing.
I know that Alvin Plantica.
Yeah. See, that's the thing. I mean, we got to be careful, and this is the thing. When we trust in God, God will give us, He will provide us powerful apologists who will have all the essentials like we do. They will have it right, and they will have the arguments as well.
Yeah, let's do some science talk. Brandon's interested in it. We got off on Calvinism. Let's talk about science a little bit, guys.
All right.
Hangout discussion. The title of it was about science, and I know Tommy likes science, and I love science, and Johnny is into it. Let's talk a little bit about how evolutionism, atheism is false, the flood is a fact, and uniformitarianism is a lie. These kinds of things, that the world is being deceived. People are being caused to believe the assumptions based on a materialistic worldview of the scientific community, which is ruled by atheists, by the way. If you don't play their ball game, you know you're out. You lose your job, whatnot. And
I was going to tell you, Neff, the guy you were debating the other night, Sam. I've been talking with him here in the past couple days, and he goes on and on about how ridiculous creationists and creationism is. And he was in a hang, not with you, but a different hangout with one of his friends, and they were kind of hooping it up and doing what they do. And I got to him. I went to him under a thread on Google Plus, and I said, something along the lines of, it's easy to be a creationist because, and I challenged him to show me any peer-reviewed paper where any scientist claimed to demonstrate that any mutation added information. And evolutionists will always try to persuade you that mutations add information, but I held his feet to the fire. This guy, he's got a master's in genetics, and so he's very familiar with all the literature, and he couldn't produce a single thing. And I was thinking that was pretty much something. But if you think about it, that's really powerful because the human body, all organisms in the biosphere, obviously we are information machines, information-rich organisms, and they don't have an explanation for any of it. So if they can't even show me one peer-reviewed paper that shows even one, much less multiple mutations can add information, then they've got an explanation for exactly jack squat.
That's right.
Which makes their evolution a fairy tale. Totally non-science. And I also he made the comment in his hangout that, like I said, they were hooping it up, and they were talking about the flu shot and the flu vaccine and the flu, how that proved evolution.
Oh yeah.
I nailed him down on the same thread about, please explain to me how the flu and/or the flu shot demonstrates evolution, and he completely backtracked and chickened out on that too.
Mm.
So, and I was gonna throw in his face that actually the flu virus, there's a lot of horizontal gene transfer stuff going on that used to be chalked up to evolution, and they've now discovered that viruses and bacteria, they exchange genes in just a split second, you know. But he totally distanced himself from that argument. I guess the point is they have absolutely friggin' nothing, and their whole argument basically hinges on appealing to authority and sounding like they are confident and, you know, like we're just trash.
Mm-hmm.
And they have all the evidence when in reality they have none.
Yeah, it's lip service. It's a system of indoctrination and like you say, attempting to sound authoritative. And you know, if you don't believe us, oh gee, you need to learn some
You're an
things.
idiot.
You're an idiot. You're not believing science. You know, you're exactly right. You're right that genetic mutations do not add information. Now, evolution, if it were true, would require a continuous input of new genetic information to explain all of the anatomical features that supposedly arose from one generation of creatures after, excuse me, multiple generations to produce different anatomies. Because remember, that's what evolution posits. Evolution posits that from one kind of creature you get fundamentally different types of organisms that have different anatomies. Those different anatomical features are going to require a massive amount of new genetic information. It's not logical to believe that you can repackage the existing information and get the information necessary to produce something completely different. And here's something that Georgia Purdom, an AIG, PhD in molecular genetics, AIG is answersingenesis.org. She says this, and I quote, I grabbed this quote from a video that she said, I think, mutations only alter current genetic information. They have never, ever been observed to add genetic information. They can only change what is there. I have a lot of papers come across my desk of supposedly mutations that have added genetic information, and I've read them all, and I've looked at them all, and never once have I seen one that added genetic information. They just don't do that. Now, here she is reading, she is telling you, I read the journals. I have papers come across my desk. Answers in Genesis actually subscribes her and other members of their organization to various science prominent journals so that their researchers can stay abreast of the information that's being published. She reads the current genetic information in the journals, and she's telling you she doesn't know of a single one that provides new genetic information, and she's not alone. Do you think maybe because she's the answers in Genesis, she's being dishonest? Oh no, I could provide you many quotes from other prominent scientists, most of which are not even creationists, and they acknowledge they don't know of any mutations that add new genetic information. So what you find is there's this process of double speak that goes on with the evolutionists. Out of one side of their mouth, when they're talking in the journals, they don't want to look like a buffoon in front of their peers, because their peers are going to call them out and say, hey, wait a minute, I know better than that. What are you saying, new genetic information? We've looked at that. That's not no such thing. They don't want the ridicule of their peers, so they won't claim that they've observed new genetic information in the journals. But when they talk to the public, out of the other side of their mouth, you get a different story.
Yep, just like Sam in your conversation the other day. I think Brandon wanted to say something. If you're still there.
Yeah, I'm still here.
Yeah.
You can hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, I was just gonna say, I think I would provisionally agree that mutation selection hasn't been shown to add information per se. What it has been shown to do is to add new functionality that is selectable. But the thing about that is it's hard to accomplish that without also incurring fitness trade-offs. Now there's the Lenski experiment, which has seen 50,000 generations of bacteria. And Mike Behe did a really interesting study of that. And in all cases where there's been a mutation or a beneficial or selectable mutation, they may have been advantageous, but they also incurred fitness trade-offs. So clearly you can't keep compounding fitness trade-offs indefinitely in order to add information to the genome, because eventually all the fitness will be degraded. However, there were a couple of instances where new information was actually added, but these were all cases where the repair mechanisms of DNA had repaired mutations that were intentionally put into place by the researchers, like knockout experiments. So I think to be clear, mutations can accomplish something that confers a selective advantage to an organism.
Right. Yeah.
That's what can be confusing.
Yes, a very good
Because-
point. There's always a negative that comes along with it.
Right, and the crucial point there is that nature does not select for creativity. Nature selects for survival alone. Mike Behe put it this way, and I thought it was brilliant. If you're in a sinking canoe, you wouldn't throw your computer overboard so that you survive and then call that evolution just because you survived.
Yeah, that's a very good point. And one of the reasons that mutations, we know today that mutations always bring. By the way, William Adamski, whose ideas I do not fully accept. He is an old Earth creationist. I'm not. Nonetheless, he's very good at refuting the materialistic evolution idea. And he wrote an article many years ago, gosh, I think it was in the early O's, about how the accruing effect of random mutations, regardless of what they might seem to produce that's beneficial, always drag with them a negative. And if you do the math, he's a PhD mathematician, and he did the math on this, and he wrote an article on his design inference website on this a long time ago, and said that, look, if you simply do the math on this, you'll find that you're going to get genetic meltdown. It doesn't matter if you get an occasional benefit out of the mutations. The overall effect is you're still shooting BBs into the phone book, and is still destroying information. And the end result is destruction of the genome. And science papers that have been published since then are alluding to that. And the science journal, the community, scientific community, is now scratching their heads as, how do we solve this dilemma? Because what we observe is that mutations accrue, compound damage over time. And how can we have existed for hundreds of thousands of years as a human species with this accruing genetic destruction? And one of the reasons that the mutation are compoundingly destructive is because we know today that genetic information is overlapping and nested. So a given base pair in a or codon in a DNA, in a sequence of information we would call a gene. Gene is an outdated term right now. It's they prefer to use sequence because gene is kind of an outmoded term. But we know today that any given codon in a sequence of information likely is part of more than one sequence of information at the same time, because the DNA information is highly compressed, it's overlapping and nested. You've got information sequences that are packaged within other sequences, and some of these overlap each other, and it's very highly compressed information. So if you're damaging one sequence of information, you're likely damaging at least one other, maybe several, at the same time. How much of that can you accrue, even if you got a seeming short-term benefit out of it? How much of that can you sustain before you just get meltdown. So your point is exactly a good one, Brandon. That's a good point. And this has become a very great dilemma for the current scientific community on genetic mutation, because they're now acknowledging in the science journals that there is this accruing meltdown of the genome, and they scratching their heads. They admit they can't figure out how life could have evolved and been going on all this time with this meltdown process, and they admit natural selection won't fix it. It's not fixing it. There are 100 mutations added to the genome of mankind every single generation. That means your kids will have 100 mutations in their genome fixed that you don't. And that means they had a lot more than 100. 100 of them got fixed, so they're passed on in the germline cells. And so their kids are going to have 100 more than they had, and their kids will have 100 more than they have. How many generations of that can go on before the genome gets so badly corrupted with disease that mankind is simply unsustainable as an organism? And it can't be hundreds of thousands of years.
Yeah, and I mean, the evolutionist response is probably something like, well, yeah, but nature selects against those mutations and selects for the beneficial ones. But what they're missing is that the beneficial ones also incur a trade-off.
And they're admitting, and more than that, Brendan, some of the papers in the journals are now acknowledging that natural selection does not fix the problem. I've got a quote that I'll find for you and paste in the text here in a minute. I'm going to run to the restroom. Where one scientist, researcher, actually acknowledges that natural selection is not fixing the problem. It's simply accruing. It's always has to have always been that way. And so they're scratching their heads. Well, how do we fix evolution theory now? Because see, what has happened is that modern science, evolution theory has run up against modern science, and it's been destroyed by it. That's as clear as that. Be right back.
Yeah, I think the funny thing is, though, is the fact, like what we're saying, all the mutations have, even the ones that confer a benefit, will have a negative effect. And so this meltdown obviously means that we're going the wrong way. We're going downhill. So if they could show some mutations that added information or that didn't, cause genomic problems, problems within the genome, then yeah, they may have a case that evolution occurred. But it seems to me it's all going the wrong direction. And when they say they have all the evidence, I just have to laugh, because all the evidence proven by the fact that they can't even show a single paper that demonstrates that any mutations add information. That just proves we have all the evidence on our side is the truth.
Yeah, well, I mean, here's another thing. I know how evolutionists, they love appealing to authority. That's their favorite thing to do. So even if, we talk about this and, so one of them, maybe they have some kind of degree or whatever, and they disagree with us. Even if that's the case, it cannot be refuted. It is a complete fact that we are seeing groups pop up all the time suggesting non-Darwinian mechanisms precisely because there is no Darwinian mechanism that's been demonstrated to work. You've got the Osaka group, you've got the Altenburg 16, you've got the Oxford 50. There was a book that just came out about the Cambrian explosion around the same time as Steve Myers. I believe it was Valentine and somebody else. And these guys are evolutionists. Yet, even in their own book, they say that some kind of non-uniformitarian cause must have occurred because it's so unlike anything we understand about the process. So I think there's plenty of evidence from authorities that they would accept that there is no mechanism.
Yeah. Yeah, go. I think Neil wanted to say something.
Let me. Yeah. Okay. Well, let me say this real quick, and then Neil can jump to Mike. Here's a paper. I provided a copy and paste in the side text here. The name of the paper is "Contamination of the Genome by Very Slightly Deleterious Mutations. Why Have We Not Died 100 Times Over?" Alexei S. Kondrashov, Journal of Theoretical Biology, published 1995, and he says this. He says, when selection acts on different mutations independently, this implies too high a mutation load. This paradox cannot be resolved by invoking beneficial mutations or environmental fluctuations. Several possible resolutions are considered, etc., etc., etc. So he's telling you, this paradox is not fixable. How do we solve the accruing effects of random genetic mutation? Now, the title of this paper is really telling. He says, why have we not died 100 times over? He's talking about mankind. Why is it that mankind has not gone extinct 100 times over in the amount of time that they claim mankind has been on this earth as Homo sapiens sapiens? Because of the known rate at which our genome is decaying. He says, unfixable. They don't know how to fix it. So it's a clear, astonishing admission, and there are others like that. What's going on, Neil?
Hey, what's up, brother? Yeah, I'll put a link in the side chat to this nice site that Ian Juby kind of directed me to, in a way. The scientist that was talking on his show had mentioned this retrovirology site that talks about ERVs and HERVs, herbs, whatever. And, you know, Joe, Dex, and I think it was somebody else that was in here before, they all try to use ERVs and HERVs as evidence of evolution. You know, I think we've been through this over and over, but I tried to tell them about telomeres and how the end of the sequences don't match up with other things, the markers that end the end of a genome or whatever. Yeah. And yeah, they use that one a lot. Fruit flies, I think that one's been killed 100 times already. Now there's no Precambrian fossils in the fossil layer or something like that, they'll say.
So now they're changing all the evidence?
Oh, they're just coming up to snuff. Whatever happened to Brandon? Brandon left? Sorry, he did. Okay. Yeah, they're just acknowledging the facts, you know. So this is Ian gave you this link, and tell us a little about this link. Does it provide? Is it information from the Science Journal that refutes the claim of the ERV common ancestry claim?
Well, it doesn't necessarily have anything to do with the evolution creation debate at all. When you read it, it's just data, and the data points to some of the things that they see in certain genomes. I'm not sure if I'm saying this right. The way that the markers, they go through a whole bunch of retro elements in the human genome. The gamma retrovirus HERV was associated with H3K4ME3. Although this association was only observed in embryonic stem cells and to a lesser extent induced in the pluritic stem cells, iPS cells. So what they're saying here is that these HERVs, in a way, Ian kind of refutes this, they would, because they have to do with the reproductive system, they're really not evidence of evolution, because it would kind of go against evolution. I forgot the way that they worded it, but it was saying, they were saying the doctor, I'll find the YouTube video, but yeah, the doctor that was on Ian Juby's show was saying that what did these common ancestors wait around for the HERV to make them reproduce? See what I'm saying?
Yeah. All right, that's a good link. I'm saving that. I was glossing through it, and really quick, I just found this about a couple of several paragraphs down. They say this: as a result, HERVs are generally considered non-functional junk DNA in some cases. though HERVs make significant, even essential, contributions to the normal physiology of the host species.
That's
Kind of double speak, isn't it? Kind of double speak. Now, you know, the evolutionists have been claiming for a long time that since most of these, what are called ERVs, are found in areas that the evolutionists have been claiming for several decades as junk DNA, which is the majority of the DNA is functionless garble left over by evolution. We know that that's false today. I'm surprised that this paper even says that, because the junk DNA idea has been discredited by many secular scientists already. They acknowledge 98, they know now that at least 98% of the genome is transcribed by the cell. In other words, it's useful information, it's not junk. So this paper is making a scientifically fallacious claim when they're claiming junk DNA right there. And they're still doing it. When was this paper published? I want to know the year, because that's way outdated. That's, I mean,
they referenced it with Ian Juby and Dr. Gene Leitner. I put up the YouTube video. They referenced it because they were kind of making fun of it in a way that they admitted that these ERVs have to do with reproductive stem cells. So it would in question ask, you would hear Dr. Gene Leitner say, well, what did these common ancestors wait around for the ERV to happen so they could reproduce, or whatever, you know?
Well, that's the reason for their doublespeak, Neff. I mean, because they know there's a consequence to saying that these have function. And that is that it gives the creationists fuel. So that's why they're using their doublespeak.
2012.
Yeah.
That's when this was published, 2012, just 3 years ago. Yeah, they're still pushing this. Yeah, you're right, Tommy. They can't be a little, they can't be too abrasive to the paradigm, you know, because then, you know, you get the, you know, the raised eyebrow effect.
Well, the paper would be rejected probably.
Yeah.
Oh, they're such criminals.
Junk. I really almost have a hard time believing they actually said junk DNA in here. You see, they've discovered before this paper was published, many years, actually several years before, that 98% or more of the DNA is transcribed by the cell. If it's transcribed by the cell and used for information to do function in the cell, it can't be considered junk. So, but they're still pumping this junk thing.
They have to. They have to, Neff, because think about it. If we have billions of years, a couple billion years of evolution, there would have to theoretically be all kinds of genes and variants that were not quite deleterious enough to get deselected. Yet so that means they should still be there.
And not to mention hundreds of buried fossils.
And funny that they will say, look, a lot of ERVs are found in areas of the DNA that are junk. Some of them provide critical information, though. So wait a minute, were they found in an area of the DNA that you would have called junk? Except that one's not junk. Oh, it's kind of cherry picking, isn't it? Oh, this one's over here, it's junk, but oh, that one's critical function. It's not junk.
Well,
See,
by the way, Neff, I brought up the argument to them. I said about this whole, what did the ERV, the common ancestor waiting around for the ERV, and they said, no, it has nothing to do with reproduction. Because they said, no, stem cells don't have anything to do with reproduction. I was like, yeah, they do.
Oh, yeah, that's very false, very false. There's a video on my YouTube channel of Richard Sternberg, a well-accoladed a PhD evolutionary biologist. That is his PhD, evolutionary biology. He was featured in the movie Expelled. He got fired for publishing a paper by Dr. Michael Behe, in fact, from his job as a journal editor. He states in that video that at stage 4, in other words, when you start out with a fertilized egg and it splits, and then those two split and you get 4 cells, at that earliest stage of development, there is a particular ERV that is necessary to be activated. If it's not, no more human development. That's it. The embryo will not function. It will not move forward from that point onward unless that what is called an ERV is activated. Now, he makes the point because in that video he's refuting one of his colleagues who's making this big, oh, the ERV and the drunk thing, and Sternberger says, no, wait a minute, I want to make a point. Hear me. And he's telling the whole room of his fears. You can hear the echo of the microphone in the background. He's in a room full of his fears, and he stops them, and he says, listen to me. He says, at stage 4, where these cells split into 4 from the human gamete, after this, what's called an ERV, is not functional, you will not get a human embryo. It's highly specific to the development of a human being. So, and his point that he's making is, how can you consider that the information of a virus if it's critical to the development of a human being? See? So, yeah.
Yeah. They measured the difference between chimpanzee and human DNA with the telomeres that mark the end of a sequence of a genome, I guess, and they don't match up. So, in that video that I sent you, the YouTube video with Ian Juby.
The telomeres don't match up. Cool.
Yeah.
A lot of things don't match up. Yeah, that's a good one. I'm going to have to look at that later. Oh, I've already bookmarked it. Cool. Yeah.
The thing about junk DNA is they used it for decades as evidence against God creating the world or creating life. Because they would say over and over, he's like, why would God fool people and put all this junk in there, so it's kind of funny that it's coming back in their face now, and they've kind of got egg all over their face for it now.
Yeah, they do. Yeah, junk DNA. It was terrible, Tommy, because their junk DNA paradigm has actually hurt science. It's hurt genetics because they believed that the vast majority of for so long they believed that only the codes for proteins was usable information. The rest of it was junk.
Right.
That's only about 3%, maybe 4 or so percent of the human genome by current knowledge. It might increase, but 3 to 4% maybe is codes for proteins, and the rest of it they thought was junk. Really? What? How mindless! So where's the information that regulates the on and off, turning off of genes that regulate to create human development? It's all based on the proteins alone? You gotta be kidding me.
That's what they said.
This is the unintellectual approach that they've taken towards biological science because of their evolutionist paradigm. But the terrible thing is that it held back genetics research for 40 years. Because they believed most of the DNA was junk, they didn't spend a nickel to investigate most of it. It's only been since I'd say, early 1990s or late 1980s that they even began studying most of the DNA, anything other than the codes for proteins, because they're starting to realize, hey, wait a minute, we noticed that this part of the genome over here that we think is junk is actually being transcribed. Polymerase is reading stuff off of that. Why would it be doing that if it's junk? So they started to investigate it. So how many millions of dollars have been wasted, and how many years have been wasted not studying the majority of the DNA molecule simply because of the evolutionist false idea that most of it was junk? Knowledge that could have been acquired. I tell you this, here we are in 2015. If they had started studying the majority of the DNA and the way that they started doing so in the 1990s, mid to late 90s, they would our knowledge of genetics would probably be 10 years and more advanced.
But they didn't want to, Neff, because it was contradicting the paradigm. Just like you were talking about, the Neo-Darwin synthesis said that as genes changed, animals changed, and the theory is like one gene for one trait. As one gene changes accidentally, then you have that corresponding trait change. And that's what the paradigm is. And so the idea that junk existed or that something that's non-coding could actually alter a trait was just against the paradigm. And so they couldn't allow that. And so they're getting around to it, and that's why they have all this extended synthesis now, because the junk DNA actually does have function.
Yeah, big time.
And so that's why they don't actually have a definition for the theory anymore. They don't even have a definition for the extended synthesis anymore. But the old theory is still printed in the textbooks. So it's another situation where they talk out of both sides of their mouth.
Comparable to vestigial organs, like they try to explain all this stuff away as it's just a leftover tailbone, leftover.
Yeah.
I mean, the list goes on. The leftover, it's a leftover, it's a leftover of what?
Yeah. And the point, it takes them no time at all to make a false claim, but it takes 25 years for them to acknowledge it was false.
Yeah.
You know?
And usually then it's not made really public.
But by then they've glossed it over with some other false claim. You see?
Yeah, but the lie worked at the time to fool a certain amount of people, so it served its purpose.
Yeah, as long as they can get it on Smithsonian and National Geographic Television, it's cool.
Science, who is it? Somebody said something like, science proceeds one lie at a time.
Sorry, I got one more. It was appendix leftover.
Oh, yeah.
That's absolutely debunked. Doctors know today medical science has proven the appendix provides two very important functions. One, it develops the human immune system during childhood, and if somebody has it removed while they're a child before they reach puberty, then they're going to be sick more often and sicker for the rest of their life than they would have been, because it's a biolab that houses various strains of bacteria and helps the immune system to develop immunities to fight them. And on top of that, it also reboots the gut after a gastrointestinal infection. So if you get, you eat some bad food, right, and you get sick and you got it coming out, on both ends, you got diarrhea and everything, and when you do that, you flush your system. All the beneficial bacteria that are in your gut that help you digest your food, they get washed out. Well, what the appendix does is then it excretes a colony of beneficial, it houses a colony of those beneficial bacteria, and when that happens, it excretes them to reboot your gut to make normal gastrointestinal function again. So it has two important functions for human beings that are known, and it might have more that are yet to be discovered.
And hey, Neff, speaking of coming out of both ends, if you don't need your tailbone, why don't you just cut it off?
Yeah.
Yeah.
What about tonsils? Weren't they the same way?
Yeah, they said tonsils are vestigial. They say the nictating membrane of the eye was useful, but now we know it helps cleanse the eye of dust and stuff every time you blink, I mean, really, these people.
They're down to about zero now. They used to have a dozen or so examples of slam dunk vestigial organs, but now they've all pretty much been debunked.
Mm.
Isn't that weird how we're all wrapped in like this high-grade plastic that we can't synthesize? Like our eyeballs are shrink-wrapped in like this, you know what I'm talking about, Neff? They have like a plastic cup, like that sack that you're talking about, if you cut it off, yeah.
Yeah, well,
it's like a membrane that it's like.
Yeah, it helps protect the eye.
Yeah, we can't synthesize anything like that, especially the eye.
Yeah, no, we can't synthesize the human body at all. And there's about a list of 12 or 15 features of the human body that they've claimed are vestigial, and all of them have been discovered by modern science. Another example of evolution theory coming up against modern science, where modern science has demonstrated, it has function after all. It's kind of important, or it's really important, one of the two, I mean, so you can live without your eyes, your ears, your legs, your arms, your tongue. Okay, great, you can survive, but what have you lost? A lot of functionality. Can you really be a human being if you take out the eyeballs, take off the legs, the arms, and everything? You're useless. What is going to happen? Natural selection would select you out. You depend on other people to keep you alive. I mean, for real. How is that person going to, walk around and be functional and have offspring if they're missing all these things?
There's a Christian. Do you ever heard of Nick Vujicic? Nick Vujicic, he is born a paraplegic.
I think I do.
No arms, no legs. He has no arms, no legs. He was born that way. He didn't.
Yeah, I know the guy. He goes around giving Christian talks at churches.
Yeah, he gives Christian talks. He's got
I know the guy.
Yeah. Yeah, he's very Christ-centered, yeah.
Yeah, I've seen him talk once. I watched one video of him several years back.
He's pretty amazing. For somebody that only has like a turkey leg for a foot and that's it, he calls it chicken leg.
Yeah, and he still has faith in Christ.
Yeah. He throws stuff around with it and does all kinds. Like, he's a little bit more able than people think he is. I guess his story was he tried to drown himself and he couldn't do it. So I guess like God like flipped him over or something.
Speaking of the coccyx, that's the tailbone, there are 9 muscles that attach to it, and if you didn't have those 9 muscles attaching to it, you'd probably poop yourself daily.
Yeah, that's what I was saying about why don't you just cut it off if you don't need it. If it's a vestigial organ that we don't need, does it not hold your ass together? Excuse my language, but yeah.
On top of that, it provides acuity in human movement. If you didn't have it, you wouldn't be able to dance or be a professional athlete either, because it provides a certain level of a very small, fine-tuning sort of control over a person's legs and their movements of the muscles in their buttocks. So you would have no professional athletes or dancers if we didn't have a coccyx and those 9 little muscles that attach. They fine-tune your ability to move your feet exactly where you want them to. So if you cut those 9 muscles, you're going to be klutzy.
They had to know about this stuff years and years and years ago when they made up that stupid assertion that it was vestigial. And doctors for sure, you know, because people hurt their tailbones. I'm sure they operated on them. They had to know all those muscles attached down there.
They knew.
I mean, it's just they you know, these lies just get carried forward, and they're never hardly ever called out by anybody.
I've heard somebody compare the human spine to a Stradivarius violin, as how beautifully made it is, how perfectly balanced it is, and everything that it does.
Oh, it's probably it's probably a lot more complex than that, though.
You know, they all, like you said, they're always talk about trying to appeal to authority. You know, like say, well, I got a degree, they got a degree, and all this. Well, it used to be a degree meant something, but now it just means that you went through the propaganda classes.
Yep.
Because you don't have any knowledge.
Yep.
You know, you believe in stuff that isn't true. I don't get it. You know, it's easily to refute.
Somebody like Jeremy Clarkson said something like that. He's like, the human spine or Stradivarius violin. He was like trying to compare things to a car. Like how beautifully made they are and whatever, you know. But it's true, if every element of the human spine wasn't present, there would be a problem.
Yep. But, you know, that was fueled from their deep desire to be descended from a bug-picking monkey. You know, so they wanted the tail. You know, the tail was really fascinating to them. The idea that humans used to have tails and swing from trees. So they just grasped onto anything they could. You know, looking at the skeleton, you know, there's a little bit of a piece that extends down below that pelvis, and so that just made their minds, you know, just run wild with imagination.
Good old Dr. Lovejoy with Lucy.
They're just, I mean, you just, golly, I mean, they're just sick in the head, just literally sick in the head.
I seen that video where everybody started laughing when they started seeing Lovejoy pull out the saw. And it starts going, ooh.
Oh, yeah.
They started cracking up.
God. Oh, my gosh.
Like, so it didn't fit, so he made it fit.
Yeah. That was classic.
I just couldn't stop laughing. It didn't fit, so he made it fit. And then you hear the saw come on, like it was just on cue.
Yeah, and then even afterwards, it was obvious that didn't look natural. You know, the shape of what his new artwork didn't look right.
You know what they'll say, though? The evolutionists will come back and say, oh, all your guys come from AIG, or all your guys come from some kind of creation institute, blah, 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 blah. They're not scientists. They're not qualified. Argument of authority, whatever, from authority. They'll just keep coming with that crap all day. Oh, well, Georgia Perdome and Ken Ham and all those other people and even Kent Hovind, they're not scientists.
Yeah.
They're not qualified.
In the meantime, you know, it's it's a privileged club, you know, that only they're allowed to enter in, you know, with science. So creationists aren't allowed. And like Westcott was saying a second ago, I mean, it's just almost like a brainwashing thing that they go through to, you know, and you're not going to get through unless you're sufficiently brainwashed.
Well, you know what? The reality of that, I'm sorry. The reality of that, of what you were saying, though, is that they say that Ken Ham and all them are from religious and everything. We don't bring up to them that they've been educated badly, even because if you have to go to that, it's because your facts aren't any good. If you have to go to they're not educated this, they're not educated that. That means your reasoning, your facts are no good. If your facts were good and everything was falling into line, you wouldn't have to, go back to authority. Just your facts would work out for you.
Well, the funny thing is, and I'm not an AIG apologist, even though I think they're pretty accurate most of the time. When they write an article or speak about something, they almost always will use a quote-unquote legitimate source, a legitimate peer-reviewed scientific source, that they have the link to, the reference to at the bottom of their article. So, they get a bad rap for being biased or whatnot, but they almost always have the evolutionist paper right there. And
yeah, well, you know what? Every
as a Christian.
Every definition I've ever seen of mutation, the scientific mutation and all that, it says there's only two kinds of mutations, and one of them doesn't get passed on to the gene code, and the other is genetic and it's only changes, and there's no the germ root, and nothing mutates in the germ other than what's normal changes to the gene code, from the dominant, non-dominant. They don't call it that anymore, I guess, but they explain that, the germline isn't affected by all these mutations in the body that people get.
When you say
the germline, but what I'm saying is they say that they say it only in one sentence, but they say the germline passes on, everything without mutation, and then they start describing what kinds of mutations there are, and what kind of, how these mutations occur, which makes people think that they're talking about mutations, being passed on, but they don't. They don't. But the real facts are right there saying that somatic mutations don't get passed on.
Right.
So, they tell you scientifically it doesn't work, but then, they imply it, and then everybody believes it.
Well, they also imply that these mutations add some kind of information, which they'll also deny and say, oh, well, it doesn't really add information. It just changes it, blah, 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 and all this stuff. It's like, dude, we already understand what you're saying. We're just speaking two different languages. You guys act like we don't understand what you're talking about, but that's because you're speaking a different language that doesn't make sense to anybody but you. The only people that understand it are people that think that they know everything about evolution and therefore there's no God. I mean, it's like, it's just... They get to this point to where they're like, well, what about your beliefs? What about creation? That's eventually it gets to that part of the argument. They're just like, what about your beliefs? Just because they can't stand on their own 2 feet.
Right. That's when they're defeated. They go back to, what about you? Because they know they can't defend them. Of course, they won't admit it to it. They want to not believe in God, which is crazy because God's the solution to every problem that they personally face. I just a side note. I was listening to this discussion. Have you ever heard of MGTOWs? I think they're called. They're men going their own way. Have you ever heard of that?
No, I guess not.
Yeah, it's kind of a thing. What it is, it's kind of against feminism. They're like, we don't need women, and so they're having a discussion, and this one person said that, it's a woman or even a guy, needs to prove themselves before they get married, because a lot of people are getting married, especially women, just to get a divorce and get their money, right? And so you don't know, what their background is or what they're going to do until you've seen if they've been married before. And if they've been married before and they left it, I mean, how do you get a good reputation that you aren't going to leave a person, right? And I thought, well, the Bible provides that, and that is, if you don't have sex before marriage, you've already proven that you're waiting for that one person, right? So, I don't know, I guess you kind of had to be there, but what I'm saying is that they're trying to have a solution to a problem without referring to the Bible, but the Bible has the very solution to it.
Right, they don't like that solution, though.
And yet, yeah, there's the solution, but they want to ignore that solution because it has something to do with God.
Yeah, it's like the solution to pregnancy and AIDS and various VDs. Their solution is not abstinence until married. Their solution is condoms and
Right.
So
They make it safe to still commit the sin. And the same thing with evolution theory. They deny the evidence for creation. Well, because why? Well, oh no, if we were designed, that means God.
Right. Yeah, I had a debate with somebody about abstinence, and they go, and abstinence doesn't work while condoms do. And I said, so what you're saying is not having sex doesn't work as compared to having sex? It is.
Yeah, that's a good point.
You're saying not having sex isn't gonna work. You're gonna have a baby by not having sex. It's totally illogical.
The more logical conclusion is don't have the sex and you can't have a baby.
Right.
Then have sex and oh no, we don't have a condom with us. Well, let's forget it. Take our chances.
Yeah, but if you didn't have sex, then you wouldn't have a baby. And then there's the fact that condoms don't always work. So if you just didn't have sex, the condom wouldn't matter. I don't. It's just a denial of God, and you can't be logical when you deny God.
Sure would be nice if some evolutionist types.
Well, I think back then.
Come in here and try to support their review and debate with us in a very cordial manner.
You got to remember, back in biblical days, the family was a lot tighter of a unit. There was no TV, there was no anything to separate us as a family. Everybody did the family what the father everybody sat down the time that was needed and ate at the same time. It's not like everybody was off doing their own thing.
I think is telling is that when atheists have a hangout, lots of atheists show up, and a creationist or two, a Christian, might pop in. But when the Christians hold hangouts nowadays, and I've noticed a change. I've been using YouTube and Google for a long time now, since about 2007. And what I've noticed is there's a trend. Fewer and fewer hangouts or chats, debates, whether they're in Skype. Before Google Hangout, there was Skype, and there was Pal Talk. But now there's Google, and what I've noticed, it doesn't matter what medium you're using, there has been an increasingly, there has been an increasing absence of evolutionists or atheists entering chat debates with Christians in whatever medium it may be over the last 8 or 9 years. That
they would rather bash you
of them. When an atheists have a hangout or to talk about evolution or atheism and ridicule Christianity or religion in general, they love to show up, and lots of them will. But and creation is the Christian is the rare exception. But when Christians do the same thing, years ago there were many more that would join Christian discussions in any medium to debate these things. But as time has gone on, there's fewer and fewer and fewer. And here we are having these debates on a regular basis, and we on a rare occasion, it seems, will get somebody with an opposing view to come in to discuss and debate these matters with us. I think that says something. I think it says that they're getting tired of having to give a true account for the things they believe and coming up against true philosophy and true science, and they're just they're scared. They're afraid of it now. I think they're just afraid of it.
Not only that, they would rather make a video about you and bash you, like right now, and talk crap about you, because for that gets them more views. You know, it makes
Yeah.
them,
Yeah, they'll get more atheist views that way.
Well, if you notice, Neff, every time they get into a room with creationists, they have a set group of go-to examples of evolution, and they always get shot down. You know, if they get in a room with a creationist who knows this topic at all, these same worn-out examples of evolution, like the peppered moths and various things that they have propped up as evidence for evolution for many years, can be easily refuted just with a couple links and a couple, just someone who knows the issue.
Mm-hmm.
And so, if you've noticed in their own hangouts, and I was watching this the other night with Sam, is they brought up the flu thing as an example of evolution, but for the most part, that was the only thing they brought up. They don't generally talk about specifics. It's more of these wide sweeping assertions about how dumb creationists are, and how all the evidence and all the authorities and everybody agrees that evolution happens, but they don't really ever get too specific with specific examples. And it's because they don't exist. And I think a lot of them they would never admit this, but I think they've kind of run against a wall with it, because they can't move, and so they can't win. They can't win the debate. Some of them who know what they're talking about can sound authoritative, like Sam and Fiona. They can hold their own and kind of fake their way through it, especially if they have if they dominate the room with evolutionists and there's only one or two creationists, they can make it happen and force their views on people. But ultimately they don't have anything anymore. All their tried and true examples have all been refuted. They're stuck with nothing, and it's really quite comical.
It is. They're in a bad way right now. They really are. You're right, Tommy. They've been refuted so thoroughly, so often, so much, with everything that comes out of their mouth, that they're afraid of. I think now of honest debate and discussion with creationists and Christians.
When I asked Sam to give me a paper from a peer-reviewed paper showing that a mutation adds information, he told me to go F myself. So, and he told me that a couple times. So that gives you these, and this is Sam, the guy who, he knows his stuff, no doubt about it. He's all into biology, and that's his career. So he's the top of the totem pole. That's pretty much as I'd put him above Fiona. So that's about as good as you're going to get on that side. And here I am, just a dude who just, on occasion reads this out of a hobby, and that's all he has to say for himself. He can't stick up for it. It's pathetic.
Yeah, I think so. I think they've been clobbered, to be honest. And put it in the most frank language possible.
I know this is a cliche question, but I keep getting this one every day. Evolution is fact. Evolution is fact. And I'm like, come on.
Yeah.
Somebody explained to me, and I like this kind of argument, but it's not really a strong argument. They said the mere existence of creationists makes evolution not a fact.
Especially when we number about 50% of them.
Hey, I see it all the time in comments on my YouTube videos on my channel. I hear that same mantra, Neil, all the time. Evolution is a fact, and if you people are just not on with science. I hear that same mantra. Evolution is a science fact. Really?
Yeah.
A fact.
Just like gravity. Just like dropping a ball.
Yeah, Tommy. Yeah, like gravity. Yeah. How many times have we heard that? Oh my God. Oh man.
You don't
believe in gravity,
Yeah.
I tell them, I say, there's the law of gravity and there's a theory of gravity. I don't know anything that's the law of evolution.
Right.
Is there any law of evolution?
There's the laws of thermodynamics, but there's no law of evolution.
Yeah, look, what's the law? What's the law? It says when you drop something, it falls to the ground. I mean, that's paraphrasing, but that's it, right? Where's there's no law, proven law of evolution. Evolution is this could have happened. It looks like it could have happened.
Yeah, evolution is an idea that was plausible to many in the days of Charles Darwin, because in his time, science was in its infancy, and they knew absolutely nothing about human biology. Absolutely nothing. Nothing. They knew the simplest things, like, you could create aspirin or some extract from a plant and it would lower blood pressure. Whoopee-doo. Did they understand the mechanism behind it and why? The chemical reasons? No. They knew nothing. In the days of Charles Darwin, they thought a cell was a membrane filled with some kind of plasma, and they had no clue as to what was going on. None.
Yeah. Well, they thought that fly spontaneously came out of meat.
Yeah, they did. Hey, I was watching a YouTube video, and I had just an epiphany, well, thanks to the video I was watching. But Wallace, he was the original guy who came up with natural selection. And Darwin sort of stole that from him. But something interesting about that is that Wallace's version of natural selection was that the environment or the selective force actually just removed the worst or the most ill-fitted of a population. And Darwin took that, like his version was that it would eliminate pretty much the runts and the deformed and the worst of it and get rid of them so that the population couldn't really change much. But Darwin took that and he changed it ever so slightly to say that natural selection removes everything other than the ultimate or the top most fit, and that populations change that way. And so it's just really interesting that he formed the whole theory kind of on Wallace's idea, but he changed what was really instinctively obvious to most people, that the runts and the freaks would get eliminated, and he ran with it and over extrapolated it to say that populations evolved because all but the most fit would get eliminated, which goes completely against common sense and what we see around us. Now there's lots of take humans, and there's lots of humans that aren't the fittest that go ahead and breed anyway, and that's true of a lot of populations, squirrels, and I think that's what selection does, is just eliminate the very worst so that the population can't veer off in wacky directions. So I just thought that was kind of interesting.
I think you're right. I think that's what we do see. I mean, Neff knows how to debate all the details of DNA and RNA, and I don't. But all I got to do is look at how they breed dogs and horses, and it's the same thing. There comes a point where that begins to die off. It's not viable anymore. What is it? Natural selection. Natural selection is basically what you were saying. It's to keep the kind within the kind. It's so that it won't go off into evolutionary crazy stuff.
It can't.
That's what selection does. It actually prevents populations from changing at least too much.
It does.
Right. I mean, that's
actually, Tommy's right. Natural selection, it's been discovered, we know today, natural selection is actually the enemy of evolution theory. Because anything that's morphing towards becoming something different means it's losing functionality for what it already is. Natural selection should remove it because it's becoming dysfunctional. That's exactly right. Evolutionists are blind to this. They cannot see it. And evolution theory has actually evolved over the years. Think about it. And Charles Darwin believed, and he wrote that organisms change in response to environmental change simply because they have the innate ability within them somehow to do that. Now, he didn't have a clue as to what that was. He just thought that they do. Now, evolutionists argue, oh, well, they discovered DNA. That was what Darwin didn't know about. He was talking about, his observation was correct, because DNA, change, mutation, is that mechanism that allowed the organism, that was the innate ability of the organism to grow, the fish to grow legs so they could move out on the land. It was mutation. Darwin just didn't know what it was. The truth is, we've learned enough about mutation to know that's not so. So, but evolution, when it was discovered that DNA was a package of information that defined the features and functionalities of the organism, the evolutionists latched onto that and said, oh, look, there's the mechanism. But then modern science comes along and says, oh, no, it's not. It's a means of destruction of the genetic information and degradation of the organism. It's a genetic meltdown process. That's what it is. And then the evolutionists, they're still in this mode today. 100 years later, 100-something years later, still claiming that random genetic mutations acted upon, firstly, that random mutations ultimately do create the new genetic information that codes for anatomical change. We know that's not true. But then they'll say, they're still adding to that by saying they're still appealing to natural selection, saying, well, natural selection weeds out the bad ones and keeps the good ones. Now, what's modern science have to say about that? Modern genetics says, no, that's not happening either. The negative mutations are simply accruing, and the genomes are still in meltdown.
Yeah.
So no matter how the evolution theory evolves, it's still coming up against modern science and still dying.
Yep. The evolutionist mechanism, random mutations, those are degenerative. The natural selection is conservative. And so you've got a degenerative mechanism and a conservative mechanism. And
well said.
You cannot build a population that way.
Beautifully said. That's exactly right.
It's just plain and simple. They're stuck. And like you, I challenge any evolutionist to come in here and prove otherwise.
Absolutely.
They can't do it. I don't care if it's Kenneth Miller, what's his name, Dawkins, any of them. Any of them can come in here.
And, Michael Sturmer,
all of them. I don't care who they are.
Neil deGrasse Tyson, Michio Kaku.
You and me, Neff, could shoot them all down, figuratively speaking, and there's nothing they could do about it.
You know they're just going to BS talk you. Like they're going to use a bunch of euphemisms and a bunch of roundabouts. I'll get it.
I got
it. Tommy, I like the way you said natural science. What did you say? That was very astute of you, very concise. I loved what you said. You said genetic mutation is degenerative, and natural selection is conservative. That is beautifully said. That's exactly it in a nutshell. And those two right there, the two base tenets of evolution theory, shot down right there.
Yep.
Think about it. If the evolutionist claims that fish grew legs, that their fins transformed into legs and came out on the land. Now, what about it? Let's say they'll harp on the idea that, well, if the organism is moving towards its ability to get out on the land and get, because of dry pond theory,
Hey, you guys, you know what? If you say that it's shot down, and they actually do believe you that it's shot down, then they say, then what?
Yeah.
And then they start arguing again. See, this is why it'll never work. Because you have no alternate theory that they can believe. They're so in love with it. It's kind of like a rebound. It's like a bounce back. As soon as you get them to the point of no return, they return.
Yeah.
Yeah, but when they get to that point, humanity has always believed innately and almost without fail, going all throughout the generations and history of humanity, that the world was created. It's just been one of those things that is just obvious to people, but it's only been in the past 100 years where science has put the brakes on all that and said, no, all you people are wrong, you're idiots. This is the alternative that's legitimate. This takes the place of God. This is the creative event, a creative, naturalistic, creative event that takes the place of a mind. This is science, and so there's no more need to believe in this outdated creationism because we've got this legitimate naturalistic explanation. Well, when that fails, then logically, you go back to what humanity, the vast majority of humanity has believed for good reason, for millennia, and so no, ultimately you cannot prove it either way. So in that sense, you can't prove a past miracle. They're right about that, but without a legitimate naturalistic alternative, then what appears to be the work of a miracle or the work of a mind, so to me logically is just as scientific and believable and true as the more so than the other.
But when you say you can't prove it, which way are you talking about?
Well, I'm saying you can't prove a past miracle, not with science. Like
well, no, I mean you're right. With science, you're correct, but not everything's proved with science. Science actually can't prove anything, but except for what is happening right now. You can only tell you what is happening now, or what something looks like. I mean, they call archaeology science, but the science of it is just how we dig it up. It's not what the science of it isn't, or reading the ruins or something like that. But there's no science in what story it's telling us or what it means. That's all speculation. Science can't tell us what it means. Science can only tell us what it is. See what I'm saying? And that's where the evolutionists make the mistake, because they think when you say, okay, we have all these bones and that proves evolution. No, it doesn't. All it proves scientifically, all you've proven is you have all these bones.
Dead animals.
That's all you've proven, and that you dug it up from under what looks like a floodplain. Okay, that's what it tells you. Now, what does it mean? That's all speculation, unless you have a historical reference.
Well, actually,
and we have a historical reference.
They'll give you a whole page of transitional fossils on Wiki. There's like 120 transitional fossils, and they want you to go through every single one of them.
Consider it for a second. All of what you guys are saying is good stuff. I want to backtrack just for a second to what Tommy said. The evolutionists put forth this idea called the dry pond theory for many years, and they're still appealing to it to this day. And the dry pond theory is this, that at some point in the very distant past, during the Devonian, there was lobe-finned fishes that were existing in a pond that was drying, or a lake that was diminishing, and this put ecological pressures on the fish that they needed to find a better food source, because the food source was diminishing. And over many generations, what they did was they started to, because natural selection started selecting for mutations that transformed their lobe fins into legs, so that because the organisms the fish started looking for a food source outside of the water, because it was diminishing in the continuously drying pond. So they needed food. So they start hopping out onto the edge of the water to get bugs and whatnot. And somehow, believe it or not, these fish were able to grab the bugs on the land. I don't know how. You tell me how, a lobe-finned fish is able to, chomp on a big bug out there. I don't know, but they say it can happen. I guess maybe it can happen because I know that if you throw catfish food on the edge of a pond, the catfish will actually jump out and they will eat it. So they believe this. But so the fish were looking for a food source outside the water, because the food source in the water was diminishing, and so they were desperate, right? So they started hopping out, flopping around on the shores, and so at the mutations that were occurring in them, that some of those fish were getting deformed lobe fins, which enabled them to be better at flopping around on the shore than other fish. See, so those were selected for by natural selection as the diminishing food source continued to diminish in the lake. But and this natural selection then selected those fish that received the mutations that moved their fins, their lobe fins, towards becoming more like legs. And so natural selection kept this process up with by selecting mutations that continuously occur to the population of fish until eventually their fins transformed into legs. That is what the evolutionists have been saying forevermore, and for about 50 years now, or 70 years. So now, what about this being a scientific idea? Consider this according to what Tommy said about natural selection being conservative. Now, so what if a fish receives a mutation that enables it to flop around, support its weight a little bit better on land than in the water? Firstly, this would have to include an endochondral mutation, not just a dermal one. It couldn't happen just to the lobe fins. It would have to happen to the shoulder girdle of the feature of the fish as well, because unless there is structural design that supports the fin to the spine, like muscles, tendons, and cartilage, it doesn't matter what the shape of your fins is like. You're not going to be able to support your weight out of water any better than any other lobe fin fish. You with me?
You're not supposed to think about that now.
I know it has to be endochondral. It can't just be dermal, right?
All right.
So now, but let's imagine, that it happened. We got to put on your thinking evolutionist imaginary caps now. Okay, so it happened, right? So, but here's the thing: with the conservatism of natural selection, as Tommy pointed out. The thing is this: if the fish is evolving, their fins receive mutations which deform them from being very much like a beautifully designed lobe fin, which has just the right tissues and just the right shape. It has the shape like an airplane wing, so that when it's pushed through the water, it causes a vacuum here and pressure there, and moves the fish. It's beautiful design, right? If that change to that design takes place, so that it's less effective as a lobe fin for moving around the water, but more effective for moving around on land. But okay, interesting idea. But now, where does this fish live most of its life? In the water. So, the natural selection, what would it do? Natural selection would say, you can't swim too well anymore. You're out. Mm-hmm. Natural selection would deselect the deformities that would move a lobe fin towards becoming a leg, because the organism spends the majority of its time surviving in the water, and that is what natural selection should be concerned with. Not the exception, but the general rule as the environment of the organism. That's what natural selection would select for. And natural selection should simply make the organism go extinct if the pond is drying, not make it morph. See, by selecting for something that makes it less efficient as for survival. So Tommy's point is well made. Natural selection actually argues against evolution, but millions of people have been duped into believing that natural selection is a mechanism for evolution.
Yeah. Well, the funny thing about that example is, evolutionists will contend that mutations are random. So what is there in the human genome? There's I think 3 or 4 billion base pairs. So that's 3 or 4 billion possible places to mutate. I don't know how many a fish type creature has, but it's probably something in there. So look how long a fish would have to wait around for just the right mutation to pop up, which means that in that environment it would have to stick around however long it took, and not to mention...
Yeah, that would have to be one heck of a slow-drying pond, wouldn't it?
Yeah, I mean, that pond would have to stay the exact same for just a gazillion years, and you're right about... It's not just the fin itself; it's all the other, the stuff in the upper part of the leg or whatever it is that would have to change. The tendons and all that stuff would have to be altered as well by mutations, which also are chance-based. See, that's the stupid thing about all this, is that there's no intelligence. They don't believe in intelligence, so it's all dumb luck on behalf of the mutation. And so, consequently, they got to wait around for millions or possibly billions of years for the right dumb luck mutations to come up. And as well as you were saying, you know, the fins, and it seems like it's amazing how when bodies do change, they just happen to change in a way that is a perfect sort of design for what environments they're in, which kind of leads the average person to think that, you know, the system is rigged, you know, that mutations can't just pop up what is a perfectly designed feature every time without just a ton of evolutionary experiments, you know, evolutionary duds gone wrong. But yet that's what seems to happen in nature. Evolutionists kind of discount that, I guess. But I wanted to go back to something real quick. You were talking about earlier about genomes going downhill, and we were talking about humans and the genetic meltdown, and how humans have been around for, what, 1 million, 2 million years or whatnot, and why we haven't totally degenerated in that time. It's actually worse than that, because they believe we mutated from a monkey type or ape type creature, and, you know, fish before that, and something else smaller before that. So actually the genomic meltdown has been going on since the beginning of time. And I don't know if you caught this whole rant, but am I still with you? Maybe?
Yeah, I'm listening, Tony.
Yeah.
So the genomic meltdown has been going on since the very beginning, the very first creature. So it's much worse than just simply the beginning of humanity that the genome meltdown is a problem. It's the original genome. You know, they're even admitting that it seems like the original primordial common ancestor had pretty much all the same genes that many or most of today's creatures have. Whatever that creature was had those same genes. So over time, couple billion years, there's no way it could withstand that sort of downward negative destructive pressure. You know, that random mutations would be sure not shooting holes into the genome. The whole thing is just, it's going the wrong way, and there's no way it could have happened. And I'm surprised it's even last 6,000 years, quite honestly, or whatever it is that we've been here. Because look at the last 100 years. I mean, the genetic diseases alone are pointing to the fact that we're degenerating very quickly.
Absolutely.
And quite honestly,
think of the list of diseases known to be caused by mutation. It's as long as your arm.
Yeah. And like Sanford said, you know, selection isn't going to help it. Selection might slow it down a little bit. You know, John Sanford. Selection may help slow that degeneration down, but it's going the wrong way, and it's going the wrong way real fast. And that points right to the fact that we most certainly were a recent creation. And I will never be convinced that this thing that we're experiencing could have possibly gone on for 2 billion years. This genomic degeneration.
How can man have existed for hundreds of thousands of years, accruing this kind of degradatory effect to his genome? It's not even logical.
No.
See, and this kills the old Earth idea, the whole evolution theory, which posits that, you know, over great vast amounts of time, organisms slowly morph from one generation after generation after generation into fundamentally different types of organisms. That idea just goes out the window, because we know that the genetic destruction of the genetic information is occurring at a rate that is way too fast for that to be true. And I think that the evidence for a young Earth creation is going to severely mount in the next several decades. But the academics who promote evolution and believe evolution theory are going to have to squiggle and figgle to find new explanations to write it off and explain it away. Because the evidence, you know, we've had up to this point people that can argue, well, you know, it could be that the Bible is not exactly right, you're interpreting it wrong, you know, the creation could have been hundreds of thousands or millions of years ago, but the Bible doesn't provide for that. It absolutely does not. So it provides for thousands of years old creation. And guess what? Science, the evidence is coming in line with what the Bible said all along. And so what we're discovering is an astonishing truth that's going to wipe away millions and millions of years of fallacy from the eyes of people who are going to be awakened to this truth. And it's not because of the Bible that's going to happen, I'm afraid. It's because of science. But what will the hardcore atheist community still do? Will deny, as always.
Yep.
Obfuscate, come up with fantasy scenarios to explain it away, even though there's no science to support them. Of course, they'll always do that. We know they'll always do that. But millions of people are going to start scratching their heads, even academics, and say, wait a minute. How can the world be so old if man himself cannot have been so old? It's not washing. I think this is going to provide a really, I'm afraid to say it, but I think, my opinion is, this is going to create a scenario whereby the world is going to finally, slowly come into alignment with creation and a young earth. And the sad thing of it is, they're going to believe the wrong cause of it. They're not going to believe it's the God of the Bible. They're going to believe somebody else. And somebody else is going to come along and claim he's the one that did it. And that's where it's going to end.
I don't know. I would like to think that, or at least some version of that. I mean, I wish that people would come around to the truth, but I think the media and science, they just have they're too strong. They have too much of a grip on what information gets to the people, to the masses, and I just can't see them letting anything that even smells anything like young Earth creationism hitting the public.
Well, I hear you, but I mean, already they're acknowledging in the journals that that life came from space, maybe, but it couldn't have started here because of the evidence that abiogenesis is physically impossible on the Earth, right? So they're already looking to the stars.
Mm-hmm. Which is funny because it had to start out there somehow. So, that would starting it on Mars would be much more difficult than starting it here.
That's what Neil deGrasse.
Yeah, what makes it any more plausible when you got a unique Earth covered with water and loads of oxygen and nitrogen and carbon dioxide? What makes you think any of these barren rocks out there? Okay,
yeah.
Please.
Neil deGrasse Tyson's been saying that for years. We're star stuff.
Yeah. You know what sickens me about the origin of life is that these guys will just assume that we're giving them a free pass or a get out of jail free card on all these chemicals and stuff that were around, but I don't give them a free pass on that. I mean, they just assume that they were there by, I guess, whatever dumb luck mechanism brought those into existence. We give them all this stuff that was in Darwin's swamp for free, or they take it for free, but I say get your own carbon and get your own atoms and get your own proteins or whatever else, not proteins, but all the other stuff that's involved in creating the first cell. They assume all this stuff was already around, but without God, none of it's around in my book. So to me, they gotta give a legitimate explanation for the origin of all that stuff.
Absolutely. Consider it, Tommy. Life requires supernatural intervention. I mean, we know today that DNA it contains symbolism in the form of language, information, linguistics, and algorithms. Now, we know those things are always traceable to mind. So why is this not empirical evidence, that all life is a product of somebody's mind? But you can point this out to an atheist and they simply deny it. I was in a Pal Talk chat room. I sometimes go to Pal Talk chat rooms and debate atheists and evolutionists. And earlier today I was in one. And I mentioned symbolism. This is the intellect these guys bring to the table. I mentioned symbolism, and I said that's an immaterial thing. It's part of the non-physical domain, right? It's not a physical thing. Symbolism, that one thing represents something else, but is not actually it physically. And this is evidence of, that the Christian worldview is correct. These guys, all they can do is say that symbolism doesn't actually exist. It's just a name. that represents something else. And I turn around and say to him, exactly, that's my point. What are you not getting? It represents something else. It's not it. That's the point. What are you not getting? And they, then they turn around and say, well, you're just a stupid Christian, stupid creationist. It's just a representation of something else. And I get back on the mic and I say, exactly, that's the point. What are you not getting? How many times do you have to repeat this to them to make them understand that the non-physical representation of one thing representing something completely different is a non-physical thing. And that doesn't support materialism, but supports the idea of mind. You can't even drum it into their heads. These people are so mindless that they can't even comprehend that.
Hey, Neff, I would be careful of this person down there. I don't know who this is, so I don't want them, bringing porn or something up on this.
Okay.
So you might.
How's it going?
Good. Do we know you?
Nope.
Okay. You're not going to sabotage things, are you?
Nope.
He said,
I don't know. I don't know if I trust that guy.
Yeah, when he said, that was it. Like he had to think about it for a second.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This has been a good hangout. I'd hate to have to take it down.
He had to think about it for a second, Tommy. The fact that he had to think about it for even 3 nanoseconds was enough for me.
Yeah.
Yeah, he said, Because if he wasn't considering it, he would have said, no.
No, yeah, I'm here to debate you or whatever.
Yeah. But no, he said, as though, I might like to, So, sorry, pal. Play a game somewhere else.
I see him muted. Did you eject him?
All right, he's gone now. Good catch, Tommy. When he said, as though he had to think about it, that told me right away.
I don't know, just that icon, that sort of icon alone. I've been in enough hangouts with Brett that they have the common theme with these kind of cartoon, sexy sort of icons that inevitably those kind of people who have those kind of icons are up to no good.
Right.
That's true. But the thing that got me was when he said, and so he had to think about it. And that was enough for me.
Confirmed it. Yeah, I just confirmed it.
Yeah, that was enough for me. Now, he'll probably join back again with a different icon. Because, these guys love to make nine different accounts for themselves.
Yeah. No.
That is like go around griefing people.
Can you make your room so that people have to be...
Yeah, I can do that.
Approve first.
I can turn on cameraman. There we go. Now they have to be approved.
I mean, I'm all for talking to somebody new and,
Oh, yeah, I'm with you. But we know the porn bombers, and what they do. Yeah. Atheists like to, if you can't refute them, smash them.
Yep. Yeah.
Now, what if Christians acted that way? What would the atheists say about Christians? Oh, you're God, you're God, you're God. They'd be on and on and on about it, right? This is their behavior, and they don't seem to have a problem with it. Oh, it was fine. It was great, man. Did you porn that one? I porn bomb that guy's hangout, man. Oh, great job, dude. Great job, dude.
Yeah.
You get a medal for it or something.
Yeah.
I mean,
man. It's like it's hard to do. It's not hard to do. It's the easiest thing to do to go in and do something stupid in a hangout. That's not hard to do. And then they act like, oh, I accomplished something big.
Yeah.
Like It was funny because I did it.
Yeah, about the easiest thing in the world is to act like a 13-year-old rebellious, obnoxious kid. I mean,
Right.
that's so easy.
Somebody ought to write an article about atheist point system, for behavior, and how you get points as an atheist amongst atheists, for your behavior and things you do. Appeal to authority. Oh yeah, you get points there. Porn bomb, Christian hangouts. Oh, big points, man.
Yeah.
Hey, look. When I enter an atheist chat, do I do any of those things? No, I bring science to the table. I bring philosophy.
So that's how you bomb them.
I bring the scriptures. I bring the truth. I bring historicity. I bring these things. This is what I bring. They can't stand it. What do they bring to our hangouts? Well, not every one of them is a porn bomber, But, I mean, when they do porn bomb, I've been in atheist hangouts listening to them where they didn't know who I was, that I'm a Christian apologist. And they listened in, and I've heard them accolade each other verbally about their such kind of behavior. I really have. I've actually listened to them pat each other on the back for that kind of thing.
Yeah. Well, ultimately, it's the end result that's important. How they get to it is not really important. The fact is, if they can be an instrument or a tool of destruction for a creationist hangout or a creationist post, or to denigrate a creationist and ruin their reputation, whatever they can do to further their cause is good for them. It doesn't really matter if it's immoral or anything.
Hey, Tom.
Or non-intellectual.
Yeah.
You see my icon? Let me get you. I need some feedback on something. My icon over here on where you see me.
Yeah.
It's got a picture of Darwin being astonished about Is it too big for this square where you see it, or does it show up fully? You see the whole picture.
Well, I only see it down at the bottom now. Sometimes it appears in the middle of the screen on some of these hangouts. The icon of the person.
No, I'm not. I mean, when I'm not talking, like, do you see Darwin? Do you see the whole words? Darwin rode a horse to work in 1857.
Well, I have, but it's not on there now. Your name is up on that screen.
Okay. Because I only see part of it, and I'm wondering.
It looks fine, I think.
It's like it's stretched or something too big. It's been bugging the heck out of me for a long time, and I don't know what to do about it.
I don't know why the icon's off there now. I don't see it, but.
I see all of it.
You do? Oh, there it is. Let's see.
You do?
Yeah, it says Darwin rode a horse to work in 1957. Was there supposed to be something else?
All right, I understand why then. Because, see, I don't have a widescreen monitor. I'm using a 21-inch CRT monitor. I plan on buying a widescreen LED monitor here pretty soon, but I'm still using a really high-quality CRT monitor that I bought about 6 years ago, and 7. And it's really great, but it's 3x4 format. It's not widescreen, so I'm stuck with that. No, so it's distorting it on my end, but not your end. So that's the difference. Okay, thanks. I understand.
Yeah.
That's my next piece of computer hardware, is to buy a widescreen LED. Then I'm going to buy a new. I need a new video adapter, a newer video card.
Well, if you've had a computer the last 6 years, that's pretty good.
I build all my own PCs. I buy the motherboards, memory card, memory DIMMs. I haven't bought a store-built, a prefab PC in ever. Well, not since about 2000. All my PCs have been, builds, personal builds. Mm-hmm. Building a PC is not hard. You just have to be careful when you put it together, so you don't short circuit anything. You diffuse your static electricity and you're cool. And ground your motherboard. You have to ground it. You have to isolate the motherboard away from the case. If you don't, you'll short it out. You have to have proper grounding when you install a motherboard. Otherwise, you'll ruin your PC. If you do those two things, building a PC yourself is really easy.
Yeah. I probably wouldn't attempt it. I'd probably screw something up.
Oh, it's so easy. You just have to ground your PC from the case, your motherboard from the case, and you have to make sure you don't have static electricity in your hands when you touch anything. The best way to do that is just run your hands around on the case itself. So if you're going to zap anything with static, you zap the case and then install. Make sure you touch it over and over and over, and then install your parts without getting up or moving your feet, because then you'll pick up static electricity. Stay still while you do it. Be back in just 1 minute.
Yeah, I was just thinking I probably better go. Been on here a while. I better go say hi to the wife and kids, see what they're up to.
Okay, Tommy. Well, appreciate you coming in, man.
Yeah, good to see you. Good to see you, Westcott. Y'all take care.
All right.
Okay. Thanks, Tommy. Okay, I'm going to take off for about 60 seconds. Be right back.
Okay. So, Johnny, you just been listening, not really doing anything? I mean, while you're doing something else? Well, yeah. So, Johnny, you still on? You're working while you're listening?
All right.
All right, what's going on? Anything?
Oh, I don't know, man. You know what?
Just leave right now, it seems.
It's too bad we don't get any atheists or evolutionists come in to
I'm
discuss
noticing.
things, Don't understand that, They're so proud to talk about them amongst themselves, but when and so readily put down Christians when you join their hangouts, but gee, they don't seem to like to join ours anymore. Anyway. Well, you know what? I think I'm going to kill the hangout, though. It's been long enough.
Fine.
And I just appreciate you guys coming in. Thanks a bunch. It would have been fun to have some guys come in, try to debate evolution with us, like the fella that I refuted in my video that I most recently put up. But I think Johnny's going AFK. He's not around anymore.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for hosting.
Hey, man. Thanks for coming, Westcott. God bless you, brother.
All right.
We'll see you soon, man. Have a good evening.